March 14th, early morning. I don't know the exact time because I forgot to write it down, and by the time I remembered why keeping a log was a good idea, I'd already been awake for 31 hours straight, and the clock on the wall of Bay 2 had stopped at 4:47, and nobody had bothered to fix it yet. I'll get to it. There's a list. The reason I'm doing this as a log instead of just in my head is because my wife Patty told me to. She said if we ever get out of this, and nobody knows what happened here, someone should have written it down. That's very Patty. She's a middle school librarian. Is. She still is one, she just doesn't have a library right now. So this is the log. I'll try to keep it accurate. I'll probably fail at the timeline because I'm not good at tracking time when I'm busy, and I have been extremely busy. Let me start from the actual beginning, which wasn't March 14th. That was just the day I started writing. The actual beginning was March 9th, which was a Saturday, which is the day I drove out to fire station number 7 to pull a water pump off the old 1987 Pierce Arrow that's been sitting in Bay 3 since before I was a volunteer here. Some background on me, because it matters later. My name is Dale Hargrove. I'm 44 years old. I've been a volunteer firefighter with Harlow County for 12 years, which sounds impressive until you know that Harlow County has maybe 40,000 people in it and 3 full-time paid firefighters, so volunteer does a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. I have a wife named Patty, a 16-year-old son named Bryce, who is currently making me regret every parenting decision I've made for the last 3 years, and a 12-year-old daughter named Caitlin, who is currently the reason I haven't lost my mind completely. My actual job, the one I get paid for, is diesel mechanic. I own a small shop about 6 blocks from my house. We do heavy trucks, agricultural equipment, some marine diesel, whatever comes through the door. I also do side work, restoring old emergency vehicles, which is how I ended up spending so much time at Station 7. They have 3 apparatus in various states of being parted out or restored, and I've been working on them off and on for almost 4 years. The chief, a full-timer named Rod Fielding, basically just gave me a key to the place and said come and go as you like. So I did. That Saturday morning, I drove over there at about 7:30 with a coffee in my hand and a specific mission: pull the water pump off the Arrow, check the impeller for cracks, order parts if needed, reinstall. Simple stuff. A 4-hour job, maybe 5 if I hit any frozen bolts. The pump was fine, for the record. The impeller was fine. That's not what I remember about that morning. What I remember is the radio. Station 7 still has a full dispatch radio setup, old style, mounted on the wall in the watchroom, just off the main bay. Rod had been talking about upgrading it for 2 years, but budget is always budget in a county department. So it was still running the same system they'd installed in 2004. It crackled and beeped the way it always did. Dispatch traffic, mutual aid calls, the usual. I'd been working for maybe an hour, maybe a little more, when I started noticing that the calls were different. Not different in a dramatic way, not right away, just off. The first thing I noticed was frequency. Medical calls in Harlow County run about 8 to 12 per day on a normal Saturday. Staggered, spread out, the usual mix of chest pains and falls and the occasional car wreck. By 9 in the morning I'd heard 14 already, and more were stacking up. I wasn't counting on purpose. I just noticed it the way you notice something's wrong with an engine by the sound of it, before you can say exactly what the problem is. The second thing was the nature of the calls. Victim displaying aggressive behavior. That one came through twice before 9. Multiple subjects down. Unknown cause. One of those. Officers requesting medical backup. Victim non-responsive to instruction. 3 of those. I set down my wrench and stood there listening for probably 10 minutes. The dispatcher sounded tired. Not scared, not yet. Just that particular stretched quality in a voice, when someone has been answering calls for 3 hours without a break, and the calls aren't stopping. I went back to work. Because I'm the kind of person who goes back to work. I told myself it was probably something mundane, some community event that went sideways, a bad batch of something. People being stupid. Harlow is a college town. Sort of. There's a branch campus of the state university about 4 miles from downtown, and there's always a baseline of weekend stupidity in the student neighborhoods. The third thing I noticed was what stopped me cold. A call came through, and it was an ambulance crew calling back to dispatch instead of the other way around. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Be advised, we've transported one patient to Harlow General, and we are requesting guidance. The patient attacked the EMT during transport. We had to restrain him. He's still, and then some word I couldn't quite catch. And then, he's not responding to anything. Eyes are open. Pupils are. Dispatch. Can you get us a doctor on the line? Something's not right here. I don't know what the dispatcher said back, because there was some interference. But about 4 minutes after that, a different unit called in. Dispatch, Unit 12. We have arrived at an address I didn't catch, and we have multiple patients down in the street. Looks like maybe 4 or 5. We need police here before we can approach. Over. I turned off the pump I'd been using to pressure test the impeller. Just switched it off. The shop went quiet except for the radio. Unit 12, dispatch. Can you describe the patients? Dispatch. They're moving. Some of them. But not right. They're not. I need police here. Over. I put my hands flat on the hood of the Arrow and looked at the floor. The concrete was stained with 50 years of oil and brake fluid and ground-in dirt. I know that floor pretty well. I stared at a specific stain that looks kind of like a handprint, which is just an oil stain. Just coincidence. But I stared at it, and I thought about what I was hearing. Then another call came through, and this time I heard a woman screaming in the background before the radio cut out. I picked up my phone. I called Patty. "Hey," she said. She was still home, Saturday morning. "Hey, how are the kids?" "Bryce is sleeping. Caitlin's watching something." "Why?" I didn't have an answer for that. Or I had an answer, but saying it out loud felt insane. "Can you do me a favor and turn on the TV? News, whatever." "Why? What's wrong?" "Probably nothing. Just humor me." She put the phone down. I heard the television come on. The specific way our TV sounds when it boots up. Then quiet. Then Dale. "Yeah. There's something on every channel. It's, hold on, more sounds. Her moving around. There's a crawler at the bottom that says Harlow General is not accepting non-emergency patients. And there's a thing about a civil disturbance downtown." "Okay. Dale, what did you hear?" "I'm at the station. Get Bryce up. Pack a bag for each of you. Not everything. Just essentials. Medicine, important documents, couple changes of clothes. And Patty, do it now, quietly, without making Caitlin panic. Can you do that?" There was a pause. Patty is not someone who panics. She's also not someone who ignores a real tone of voice when she hears one. And she could hear mine. "How long do I have?" "I don't know. 30 minutes maybe. I'm coming home. Keep the doors locked." "Okay. Okay. I love you." "Love you. Drive safe." I love her for that. Drive safe. Like I was going to the grocery store. I put my phone in my pocket and stood in Bay 3 for a moment and looked around at the station. I'd been coming here for years. I knew every inch of it. The thick, poured concrete walls that were part of the original 1962 construction, back when they built things to last. The heavy steel overhead doors on the bays, which could be bolted from the inside. The watchroom up top, not a proper watchtower, but an elevated observation room with windows on 3 sides that looked out over the surrounding streets. The underground cistern that Rod had been meaning to hook up to the water collection system for 2 years. The diesel fuel storage tank behind the building, 6,000 gallons, maybe half full. The gear lockers, the medical kit, the tools. I stood there and I thought, this is a very good building to not leave. Then I thought about Patty and Bryce and Caitlin in our house 6 blocks away. I got in my truck and drove. The drive from Station 7 to my house normally takes about 7 minutes. That Saturday morning it took 22, because Pine Street was blocked by 2 police cruisers, with their lights going, and a loose crowd of people that I couldn't see clearly enough to understand at first. They were just standing in the road, more or less, and the officers were trying to move them. I went around on Alderman, then on Birch. then cut through the parking lot of the hardware store. Nobody stopped me. Traffic was weird. A lot of people clearly going somewhere in a hurry. A lot of people clearly not moving at all. I pulled into my driveway, and Patty was already on the front porch with 3 bags stacked by the door. That's my wife. I gave her 30 minutes and she was done in 15. The kids were with her. Bryce had the look he gets when he's trying to appear unbothered. Jaw set, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, staring at the street like he was evaluating it. Caitlin was holding her backpack straps with both hands and watching me pull up with those serious gray eyes of hers. I got out of the truck. "Okay," I said. "Okay what?" Bryce said. "We're going to the fire station." "Why?" "Because I said so," which is never a good answer for a 16-year-old, but I didn't have time for a better one. "Get in the truck." "Dale," Patty said quietly, pulling me a step aside. "What do you know?" "Not enough. Something's wrong in town. Bad wrong, I think. The station is solid concrete. It's got supplies, it's got fuel, it's got water." "How bad are we talking?" "I heard an ambulance crew call in scared. Dispatch is running 15 calls an hour. There's something happening at the hospital." I looked at her. "How bad do you think I'd have to think it was to call you on a Saturday morning and tell you to pack a bag?" She didn't answer that. She picked up a bag. "Neighbors," she said as she carried it to the truck. "Frank's retired. He's got nothing to get home to. Trish is a nurse. She'd be useful." "Yeah, fast though. Give me 5 minutes." She walked across the street to Frank Dowd's house while I loaded the bags and got the kids situated. Frank is retired Army, 63 years old, white-haired and compact, the kind of man who keeps his gutters clean and his flag straight and his opinions mostly to himself. He's been our neighbor for 8 years, and I trust him about as much as I trust anyone who isn't family. Trish Kowalski lives 2 houses down. She's a registered nurse, works at the county hospital, 40-something, divorced, keeps to herself mostly, but she's the person you go to when your kid gets a bad cut, because she can look at it and tell you in 10 seconds whether you need stitches or not. I didn't know her well. Patty knew her better. Patty was good at this. She had a way of explaining things to people that made them feel like they were making a decision instead of being told one. By the time I'd gotten the kids in the truck and walked back across to Frank's yard, she'd already talked to both of them, and they were both saying yes. Frank came out of his house with a hunting rifle in a case and a calm expression on his face, like he'd been waiting for something like this to happen, and was relieved it was finally here. Trish came with a large bag and a smaller bag, and a look on her face like she thought this might be an overreaction, but wasn't willing to bet on it. They squeezed into the extended cab with Bryce and Caitlin. I looked at Patty in the passenger seat. "Gary Pruitt," I said. "He's auto shop on the far end of Buckle Street." She was already dialing. "I know him. Give me a sec." She put the phone to her ear. I backed out of the driveway. Gary Pruitt is a mechanic like me, a guy I've done work with and traded favors with for years. His wife Donna is a big, practical woman who can outwork most men I know, and who I figured would be an asset for about 60 reasons. Patty got through to them on the second ring. I heard her side of the conversation as I drove. Short, direct, no hysteria. "Come to Station 7, now. Bring what's important." Yes, now. It took them longer to get there. They live farther across town. But they made it. The drive back to Station 7 was more complicated than the drive away from it. By this point, it was about 11 in the morning, maybe 11:30, and the streets were wrong. Not wrong in a movie way, not with cars crashed and fires burning, just wrong in a way that made the back of your neck do a thing. People walking in directions that didn't make sense. A car stopped in the middle of the road with the door hanging open and nobody in it. A dog running full speed down the sidewalk with its leash dragging. And then, at the corner of Maple and 3rd, something that stopped me cold. A woman standing in the grass in front of a house, just standing there, facing the street. She was maybe 50, in pajama pants and a blue robe, and she was looking at our truck as we went by. And I mean looking, not glancing, her head turned to follow us. Eyes open, that flat kind of open that doesn't track right. Her mouth was moving, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. Don't look, I said. I don't know who I said it to. I said it to everyone. Was she hurt? Caitlin asked. Don't know. We're not stopping. I kept driving. We got to Station 7. I pulled up to the bay doors on the side street and killed the engine. For a second, everyone just sat in the truck, and nobody said anything. All right, Frank said from the back seat. His voice was even, unhurried. What's the plan? That was when I knew we were going to be okay. Not because Frank said it in a reassuring way. Just because having someone ask that question meant we were all on the same page. There should be a plan, and the plan should start now. Get inside, I said. Pull the bay doors down behind us. Then we assess. Station 7 sits on the corner of Linden Street and Canal Road, which in 1962 was the edge of the commercial district, and now is sort of an awkward no-man's land between a strip mall and a residential block. The station itself is an L-shaped building. The main structure runs along Linden, 2 stories, poured concrete from the foundation to the roofline, and then the bay extension runs perpendicular out along Canal Road. 3 apparatus bays. The main bay holds the current active engine, a 2009 Pierce Sabre that's in decent shape. Bay 2 holds the 1994 International that's used for brush and grass fires. Bay 3 is where the 1987 Arrow has been sitting in pieces while I restore it. The second floor is offices, a bunk room with 6 bunks, a kitchen, and the watchroom at the corner, with windows north, east, and south. There's a stairway in the main building and a separate exterior stairway in the back. Below the station, accessed through a hatch in Bay 2, is the old cistern. It's from the original construction, a square concrete tank about 8 feet on each side and 6 feet deep, designed to supplement the hydrant system during droughts. It hadn't been used in years. It was dry, but it was structurally sound and sealed. The building sits on a raised concrete apron. The whole lot is elevated maybe 2 feet above street level, with a 6-inch concrete curb running around the perimeter. Not a wall, not a fence, but that rise matters when you're thinking about what can wander in. It reduces what can get at you from a ground-level approach. Not perfectly, but some. That was my mental inventory as we pulled into the bay, and I hit the button to bring the door down behind us. 8 people. Me, Patty, Bryce, Caitlin, Frank, Trish, Gary, Donna. 2 trucks, what we'd grabbed in 30 minutes of packing. First thing, I said, once everyone was out of the vehicles and standing in the bay, is we inventory what we have. Second thing is we get those remaining bay doors secured from the inside. Third is the watchroom. Someone needs to go up there and look around and tell me what's happening out there. I'll go, Frank said. Good. Gary, help me with the doors. Gary was already looking at the door mechanism with his hands on his hips, doing exactly what I'd be doing, which was figuring out how to make the automatic opener manual so we could lock it down. These bolt from the inside? He asked. They do. The latches are on the track here, I showed him, but the automatic openers mean someone could technically trigger them from outside if they had a remote. So we disconnect the openers. That's what I was thinking. While we did that, Patty organized the supplies. She spread everything out on the hood of the '94 brush truck and started making piles. Food, medicine, clothing, tools, other. Trish helped. Donna stood next to them for about 30 seconds, and then took over in the quiet, authoritative way she has, because she's the most organizationally competent person in any room she walks into. Caitlin stood near the supplies pile and didn't get in anyone's way. Bryce stood against the wall with his arms folded. You could help, I said to him as I walked past. What do you need? Find me the inventory binder. It's in the watchroom, or the office, one of those. Should have a list of what's in the storage room off Bay 1. He went. I didn't watch him go, but I heard his footsteps on the concrete going toward the stairs. By the time Gary and I had the bay doors secured, which took about 40 minutes between disconnecting the drive motors and adding the secondary bolt locks I found in the maintenance closet, Frank had come down from the watchroom. You want the good news or the bad news, he said. Start with what you saw. To the north, toward downtown, there's smoke. Not building fire smoke, it's more diffuse than that. Could be a lot of small fires. To the east, nothing obvious. South, toward the strip mall, I counted about 11 things moving in the parking lot. Things. People. Or what used to be people. He said it flat, no drama in it, like he was reporting a weather observation. Moving wrong. Moving slow, most of them. A few moving faster. None of them heading toward us. Yet. Toward the sound, I said. I'd figured this out on the drive over, watching the woman on Maple Street track our truck. They moved toward noise. That's what it looked like. Okay. So we are very quiet. I looked around at everyone. Everyone hears that? No engines running unless we have to. No unnecessary sound. Inside voices. What are they? Donna asked. Don't know. Don't care right now. You don't care? What I care about is what they do, not what they are. I wasn't trying to be dismissive. It's just how I think. Knowing the taxonomy of a broken engine doesn't fix the engine. What you need to know is the behavior, the symptoms, the failure mode. They move toward sound. From what I saw on the way here, they don't run. They walk, mostly. Some faster than others. They bite. They attack. And whatever they are, I don't think getting bitten by one is something you want to let happen. The hospital, Trish said. Her voice was careful. Yeah. We should try to raise them on the radio. We will. But first things first. Is everyone inside? No one's hurt? Everyone confirmed. No one was hurt. Then let's figure out what we have. This is what we had in that first inventory. Food. Maybe 4 days at full portions for 8 people. Patty's bags had canned goods, some dry pasta, 2 packs of rice, a box of crackers, some granola bars, a jar of peanut butter. Donna had grabbed their pantry with both arms, basically, and she had more. 3 large cans of beans, a big bag of dried lentils, soup cans, more canned vegetables, 2 pounds of coffee, a bag of sugar, salt and pepper. The station itself had a kitchen on the 2nd floor with some basics the crews kept stocked. More canned goods, a large container of oatmeal, instant coffee, a big bag of mixed nuts, 2 cases of water bottles. Medical. Trish had her nurse's bag, which was worth more than everything else combined. Proper bandaging materials, antiseptic, sutures, pain medication, blood pressure cuff, stethoscope. The station had a standard first aid kit and an AED. Also an oxygen tank with maybe 40% remaining. Fuel. The diesel storage tank behind the building, accessed via a locked cage in the back. I didn't know the exact level, but I knew it had been topped off in November for winter ops. At least 3,000 gallons, possibly close to full. The 2 trucks in the bays were full. Fire apparatus stays full by policy. My truck had about 3/4 of a tank. Gary's truck had a little over half. Tools. We were in a fire station, and I was a mechanic. Tools we had. Water. The cistern was dry. The building's water came from the municipal supply, which was still running, but I didn't trust it to stay that way. We had the water bottles from the supply runs, maybe 50 gallons equivalent if you counted all the bottles and jugs. Not enough. Weapons. Frank's hunting rifle. A SOF. 30-06, with 2 boxes of ammunition. Gary had a shotgun in his truck, 12 gauge, with 1 box of shells. I had a .357 revolver in my glove box that I'd completely forgotten about until Frank asked, and then felt a little embarrassed about how long it took me to remember it was there. 2 speed loaders. That was it. No AR-15s, no Army surplus stockpile, no perfectly prepped emergency cache. Just what a normal collection of regular people happened to be carrying on a Saturday when the world broke. 8 days of food at rationed portions, maybe. 3,000 gallons of diesel we couldn't eat. Enough water for a week if we were careful. Enough bullets for exactly nobody to feel comfortable. We need more food, Donna said. She was looking at the inventory list Patty had written out. Yes, and water. Yes, the cistern is an option, but we need to collect something to fill it with. When? Soon. I looked at Frank. How clear was the street to the east? East was quiet. 3 cars on it, all empty. No movement I could see. There's a Food Plus on Emerson. That's 3 blocks east. then 2 north. Small grocery, mid-size. Is it going to still have anything in it? Maybe. It was Saturday morning when this started. They'd have gotten Friday's delivery. Might be picked over, might not. Who goes? I thought about it. You and me. Gary can back us up. Stay with the truck. We take a truck in case we get anything worth carrying. When? Hour. Let me check the radio first and make sure the watch room is properly set up. The radio room, which is actually just the watch room with a desk and the dispatch console along one wall, became the most important room in the building, starting about 20 minutes after we got the bay doors down. I sat at it while Bryce stood behind me, which he'd started doing. Not because I asked him, just because that's where he put himself. I scanned through the dispatch frequencies first. What I heard over the next 40 minutes, I'll try to write down accurately, but it gets harder the more I think about it, because some of it still doesn't sit right in my memory. The Harlow County dispatch frequency was chaos, not screaming, not drama, just traffic so dense you could barely separate calls. Units reporting in, units going silent, units calling for backup and getting nothing. The dispatcher, a different one by now, a man, older sounding, was doing his best, but you could hear it in his voice. That specific quality of a person who has understood something terrible in the last hour and hasn't yet figured out what to do with the understanding. The hospital line, which we could reach through the radio on a secondary frequency, was just ringing. No one picked up. The state police frequency had intermittent traffic. Most of it was cryptic, officers using coded language that I only half understood. But one transmission came through clear enough that I wrote it down. All units be advised. Do not transport infected persons to medical facilities. Repeat, do not transport. Harlow General reports containment breach. Shelby County Regional has reported same. Be advised, all field units. Anyone displaying behavioral symptoms is to be considered. And then it cut out. I sat there for a second. Considered what? Bryce said. Don't know. What are behavioral symptoms? Walking wrong and biting people, I think. That's helpful. I'm going to try the mutual aid channels, I said. See if any other departments are out there. I worked through them. Most were static or blank. A couple had traffic that sounded like garbled emergency management chatter, the kind of stuff that goes back and forth when agencies are trying to figure out command and control in a big incident. Nobody sounded like they were in control. Everyone sounded like they were waiting for someone else to take the lead. Then, on the statewide fire mutual aid channel, Channel 13, I got something different. A voice, clear, calm, professional, like a firefighter talking to dispatch on a routine structure fire call. Any station receiving on Channel 13, this is Station 12, Merton Township. We are operational. We have personnel. We are sheltering in place. If you are a fire or rescue unit, please respond. Station 12, Merton Township, Channel 13. Come back. I grabbed the mic. Station 12. This is Station 7, Harlow County. We're receiving you. Over. A pause. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Station 7, Station 12. Good to hear you, brother. How many do you have? 8 souls. No active fire personnel. I'm a volunteer and mechanic. You? We've got 5 here. 3 full-time, 2 volunteer. Is your station secure? Working on it. You? Doors are down. Been down since about 0900. We're northeast of you, maybe 40 miles. Copy that. What are you seeing out there? Another pause. The voice, I never caught his name that first time, just the station ID, seemed to be considering what to say. We're seeing things we don't have good language for yet, he said, but we're functional. Keep this channel open if you can. We'll check in. We'll be here, I said. I put the mic down. Bryce was looking at the radio like it owed him an explanation. Station 12 is 40 miles northeast, he said. Merton Township, yeah. That's someone out there. That's someone out there, I agreed. He didn't say anything else. But he stopped having his arms folded for the rest of the afternoon, which for a 16-year-old boy is basically the same as a speech. The first run to Food Plus happened that afternoon, about 3 o'clock. Me and Frank. Gary staying back at the station. I took the 2009 Sabre, not for sentimentality, but because it's the biggest vehicle I had available, and it has a large compartment that we could load with supplies, and also because driving a bright red fire engine through a town that was going sideways felt, weirdly, like the right kind of visible. If anyone was watching from a window, wondering whether to trust whoever was driving that thing, a fire engine sends a specific message. We rolled the bay door open manually. That's a big door, heavy, takes both of us, pulled out, and rolled it back down. Gary and Patty bolted it from the inside. They'd open it when we honked twice. The streets on the east side were quieter than the north side. Frank had been right about that. We went 3 blocks, turned north on Emerson, and there was Food Plus at the end of the block, a squat flat-roofed building with a parking lot and a row of shopping carts still lined up outside like nothing had happened. The front doors were smashed, not broken in the sense of being forced, smashed, like someone had driven something into them, glass everywhere on the concrete apron. "We go in fast," I said. "You watch the entrance, I load." You know what you're looking for? Calorie density. Canned goods, dry goods, oil, anything preserved. Skip the produce, skip the deli, skip the dairy, anything that keeps. Got it. We left the engine running. The noise was something I'd thought about and decided I was willing to risk for the sake of a fast exit. I grabbed 2 flatbed carts from the line outside and pushed them in through the broken door. The store was dim. The overhead fluorescents were out, but the front windows gave enough light to see by. 3 aisles had been knocked over or raided. The chip and snack aisle was almost bare. The bread was gone. The bottled water section in the back was stripped. But the canned goods aisle was maybe 60% untouched. People panic buying grab what they think they want. Water, bread, chips. They skip the canned beans. I loaded. I didn't have a lot of time to be selective. Canned beans, canned chickpeas, canned corn and peas and tomatoes. Canned tuna and salmon and sardines. Big cans of soup. Large containers of oats, rice, dried lentils, flour. Cooking oil. Found 4 big jugs. Salt, sugar, baking powder. A whole shelf of peanut butter and almond butter. Honey, 4 big jars. Hard candy because I don't know why. It just seemed smart. Vitamins. I also grabbed the small pharmacy rack near the front. Tylenol, ibuprofen, antihistamines, antacids, anti-diarrheal stuff. All of it. Trish had asked specifically for over-the-counter supplies when I'd told her we were running. 45 minutes total. I was sweating through my shirt by the time we had the carts loaded and the compartment packed. One thing happened while I was loading that I haven't mentioned yet, because I'm still not sure what to make of it. About halfway through, I heard something in the back of the store. The deli area, which was dark. I stopped. Frank was at the door, rifle up. I picked up the tire iron I'd brought. Something moved back there. Not fast. Slow. Uncoordinated. The shuffle of something navigating by bumping into things. Glass broke. Then silence. I kept loading. On the way out, I looked toward the back. Through the murk of the unlit deli section, I saw a shape, standing behind the deli counter. Just standing there, not coming toward us, not making a sound now. A woman, or something that had been one. Deli apron still on, paper hat sideways on her head. She was just standing in the dark behind the counter, swaying almost imperceptibly, her hands resting on the glass case, watching us, or facing us at least. Hard to know if watching was still something she did. I said nothing. I wheeled the cart out. We loaded the engine. We left. I thought about her on the drive back, standing behind her counter. Part of me wanted to find some kind of meaning in that. The way the body keeps going through the motions, the muscle memory of a job. But that's the kind of interpretation that makes people feel better, not the kind that helps you survive. She was there. We left her there. That's all there is to it. The next 3 days were the busiest I've ever been without a clear goal. That sounds like a contradiction, but it isn't. When I'm working on an engine, I know what done looks like. The engine runs, or it doesn't. With the station, I knew the general shape of what I was trying to do. Make this building into something we could live in safely for an indefinite period. But the specific steps between here and there were a long chain of problems that kept revealing themselves one at a time. Day 1 was about security. The bay doors were down and locked. The front door on the Linden Street side was a standard commercial steel door with a deadbolt, which I reinforced by welding a steel plate across the inside. We had a stick welder in the shop bay, and I used it until my arms hurt. The rear exterior stairway door was the weak point. It was old, the frame was iffy. Gary and I built a bar brace for it out of a piece of 2-inch steel tubing from the supply cage. The windows on the ground floor were already small and set high, old station design, for ventilation, not view. We covered them with the steel mesh we cut from an old flood control barrier we found rolled up in the back of Bay 3. Not elegant, functional. Day 2 was water. I'd been thinking about the cistern since we arrived. The main building's water was still running from the municipal supply on the second day, which surprised me, but I didn't trust it. Municipal water depends on pumping stations, which depend on power or generators, and I had no way to know how long those pumps would stay running. The cistern holds about 2,880 gallons when full. That's a lot. But it was dry, and it needed to be connected to something. The station roof is essentially a flat-top drain system. All the rain that hits the main roof drains to 2 downspouts on the back wall. I traced them, found the connection points, and spent most of day 2 rigging a diverter system to route the roof drainage into the cistern through the existing vent pipe. It wasn't a perfect system. I needed fittings I didn't have and had to improvise with some copper pipe from the maintenance cage and a lot of plumber's putty. But when we tested it with the water we could spare, it held. It rained on day 3, heavily. By that evening, we had about 600 gallons in the cistern. I would have cheered out loud if we were allowed to make loud noises. Also on day 3, the fuel situation. The tank behind the building was good. I'd checked the gauge. 3,400 gallons of diesel. But the generator for the station ran on diesel too, and if we ran it continuously, we'd go through a significant amount. I mapped out a rationing system. Generator runs 8 hours a day, from 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, covering cooking, charging equipment, and running the water pump. Outside those hours, battery lanterns and no unnecessary electricity. The current apparatus in the bays also had full tanks, which I preserved. The Pierce Sabre held about 60 gallons. The brush truck held about 40. I didn't plan to use them for fuel. Their value as vehicles for supply runs was higher than their fuel was worth for the generator. My truck and Gary's were the supply run vehicles. I kept them topped up from the storage tank. Frank spent day 2 and 3 in the watchroom almost continuously. He'd sleep 2 hours, go back up, sleep 2 hours, go back up. He was the one who told us, on the evening of day 2, that the strip mall to the south had approximately 40 of them in the parking lot, not moving toward us, just there. "What are they doing?" Patty asked. "Not much," Frank said. "Walking in circles, some of them. Standing. A couple of them got into it with each other for a while. Got into it, bit each other, then stopped. Then just stood there. So they'll bite each other too," Gary said. "Looks like it. Doesn't help them much." "No," Frank said. "It doesn't." On the evening of day 3, I got on channel 13 and raised station 12 again. "Station 7, this is station 12. Go ahead. Just checking in. How are you fixed?" "Stable. We did a supply run yesterday. Lost one of our guys on the way back. That landed in the room like something heavy dropped from height." "I'm sorry," I said. "Yeah." The street looked clear and it wasn't. He was out of the cab for about 30 seconds. A pause. "You figure out the sound thing?" "Yeah." They moved toward noise. "We figured that out the hard way. How are your doors?" "Solid. How are yours?" "Our East Bay door has a problem. The bottom seal is compromised. They can't get through. The gap's too small. But we can hear them at night, working on a fix. Good luck." "You mentioned you're a mechanic. Diesel?" "Yeah. You know, I've been thinking about something," he said. "You have apparatus, right? Operational units?" 2. Plus the one I'm restoring, which needs the pump reinstalled and a few other things. but is basically solid. 3 units, he said, and there was something in his voice I couldn't quite read, like he was doing arithmetic. Good to know. Stay on channel. We will. Station 7 out. I put the mic down. Bryce was in the doorway again. He'd taken up residence in that doorway. I think it was the watching that he liked. Being in a position to observe things without having to commit to them. What do you think they want? He said. Help, probably. Same as everyone. What kind of help? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. And I knew that saying I don't know would bother him more than silence. I need to tell you about the first close call. Because I've been putting it off. And if I don't write it down now, I'll keep leaving it out. It was day 4, late afternoon. I was in Bay 2, working on connecting the roof drainage properly. The improvised system I'd built 2 days earlier had started dripping at one of the joints, and I needed to seal it better. I was under the drain pipe with a heat gun and some aluminum tape. Caitlin came in. Dad? Yeah. Something's at the east door. Not the bay doors. The east door, which is a side entry door on the Canal Road face of the building that I'd completely forgotten to block. In my defense, though I'm not particularly interested in defending myself here, it's an old door that nobody uses, leads to the electrical room. It's behind a locked cage in the alley. I didn't think anything could reach it. I dropped the heat gun and followed Caitlin at a fast walk, not a run, because running makes noise. The door was rattling. Not hard. A loose, rhythmic bumping. Something on the other side that kept bumping into it. The door was solid, but the lock was a standard key deadbolt, and the door itself was original 1962 steel, but the frame around it was original 1962 wood. That was the problem. The frame. I could see that the lower frame was cracked. Old wood, old paint, stressed from the door being yanked at. Not cracked through, cracked enough that I could see a line of light along the bottom. I went to the supply cage and came back with the 2-inch angle iron I'd been saving for exactly nothing in particular. Gary appeared behind me. Caitlin must have gone to get him. He held the angle iron in place while I drilled through it into the concrete block on either side of the door. 4 bolts, 1/2 inch, recessed into concrete anchors. The door was still rattling while we did this. We could hear something on the other side. I didn't know if it was one or several. The bumping was uneven. Stop, then bump, then 2 bumps, then stop. Not systematic. Not like something smart trying to test the door. Just impact, drift away, impact again. It took about 25 minutes to do the angle iron properly. By the end of it, the door had stopped rattling. We went back 2 hours later to check, and there was nothing at it. Whatever had been there had wandered off when we stopped making noise. That was the closest it got in those first days. Not very close, objectively, but close enough that I realized I'd been operating under a comfortable assumption that the building's general solidity was enough, that they couldn't get through a steel door with a deadbolt, and comfortable assumptions are what get you killed. I spent the next 2 days checking every point on the exterior that I hadn't checked already. I found the electrical room window, 6 inches square, set high, steel mesh already on it. Found a basement vent that I hadn't known was there, a rusted metal grate on the Canal Road wall, right at street level. I filled it from the inside with expanding foam, and then put angle iron over it. I found the old coal chute. This one almost gave me a heart attack. The building had been converted from coal heating in the late 70s, but the old chute access was still there on the north wall, a 30-inch square steel door at ground level that opened inward. It was padlocked. The padlock was old, and I didn't know where the key was. I cut the lock off, looked into the chute, a dark, concrete-lined tube that went up into a now-sealed utility space, and then sealed the door from inside with angle iron and concrete anchors. How did you not know that was there? Gary asked, not accusingly, just genuinely curious. I've been coming here for 4 years, and I've never had a reason to look at the north wall at ground level. Fair enough. It's the stuff you haven't looked at that gets you. Yeah. He paused. What else haven't you looked at? Good question. Let's find out. We spent the rest of that afternoon doing what I should have done on day 1. Systematic exterior inspection. starting at the northeast corner and going around the whole perimeter. I made Frank come down from the watchroom because 4 eyes see more than 2. Bryce came too, which meant he was being useful instead of watching from doorways, which I counted as a win. We found one more vent cover on the south wall that needed additional securing. A section of the roof parapet that was cracked and could conceivably be a climbing issue if something got on the roof. I assessed this as low risk because everything I'd seen suggested these things didn't climb, but I put it on the list. One broken window on the second floor, north-facing, that I'd known about but hadn't fixed because it was second floor and I'd thought it was safe. I thought about it differently now and patched it with a piece of plywood from the supply room. By the end of the inspection, I had a list of 6 more things that needed doing. I knocked 2 off before dark. By the end of the first week, we had something like a routine. Watch schedule. Frank and Bryce did the night watches, alternating with Gary. Frank was the one who came up with the watch structure, which made sense given his background. 2-hour rotations. 1 person in the watch room, 1 person awake in the bunk room available to respond. Day watches were shorter and less structured. Everyone kept an eye out. The watch room was rarely empty. Meals. Donna had appointed herself head of food, which I was completely fine with, because she was better at it than anyone. She cooked on the propane camping stove we'd found in the storage room during the systematic inspection. Didn't want to use the kitchen stove's electric burners during generator off hours. 2 meals a day, not 3. Breakfast and dinner. Lunch was whatever you could grab cold from the supply shelves. Portions were tight, but not punishing. Donna had a gift for making lentils taste like an actual meal. Exercise. This was Patty's department. She came up with a morning exercise circuit in Bay 1, far from any exterior walls. Kept quiet. Bodyweight stuff. No jumping. Nothing that would create vibration on the floor. Half an hour every morning. Everyone did it, even Frank, who pretended to think it was unnecessary for the first 2 days and then stopped pretending. The watchroom log. Bryce started keeping a written log of what he saw from the watchroom, which was his idea and which I thought was good. He had a yellow legal pad that he'd found in the office, and he filled it with the same kind of precise, emotionless observations that Frank would give. Time, direction, number observed, behavior. He was specific about behavior in a way that I found useful. Moving northeast, erratic, appears to be tracking audio source. Standing, no discernible movement for 15 minutes, 3 together, moving in loose formation north to south along Canal Road, passed without incident. 3 together was the first observation of grouping behavior. I asked Frank about it when he came off watch. They don't cooperate, he said. Not consciously. It's more like they end up in the same area, because they're moving toward the same sounds. So they congregate without organizing. Right, like fish. No coordination, same direction. This mattered for supply runs, which we did every 3 days through that first week. The pattern we'd found was that the area directly east of the station was consistently the quietest. Fewer of them, less activity. I didn't know why. The strip mall to the south had the highest concentration. I'd take the truck east, then north or south depending on the target, then back. Day 7. We hit the auto parts store on Emerson. This sounds like a weird choice for a food run, but I wasn't going for food. I needed 2 things. A proper hand pump for the cistern. The municipal water was still running, but I wanted to be ready when it stopped. And spare parts for the generators. Gary came with me this time, Frank watching the station. The auto parts store was untouched. Nobody had thought to loot it, apparently. We walked in through the unlocked front door. The employees had clearly just left. Lights still on, computer still running at the counter, and I spent 20 minutes getting what I needed. Hand pump, fittings, spare belts, oil filters, transmission fluid, a full set of emergency fuses, wire, electrical tape, a multimeter. Gary found a car battery charger and 3 spare batteries. Also, because I had the thought, I cleared out the small camping and emergency section by the door. 2 hand-crank flashlights, a hand-crank radio, waterproof matches, a water filtration straw, 2 of the foil emergency blankets. On the way out, Gary stopped. Dale. I stopped. There was a man across the street, standing between two parked cars, facing us, but not coming toward us, just watching. That same flat gaze I'd seen on the woman on Maple Street that first morning. He was wearing a Harlow County Electric polo shirt. He looked like he might have been 40, maybe less. Hard to tell. His face was wrong in the way I'd started cataloging as just wrong. The eyes too wide, the jaw loose, something off about the baseline expression that I could recognize now, but still couldn't describe accurately. We were being quiet. He was maybe 60 feet away. "Don't move," I said quietly. "Don't make noise." We stood completely still. The man, the thing, stood completely still. 30 seconds. A minute. Then a car alarm went off 2 blocks north. Something had set it off. A sound, a vibration, who knows. And the man turned, just turned without any other movement, and walked north toward the sound. Not fast, not slow. Just walked. We loaded the truck and left. That night at dinner, which was bean soup and crackers and, luxury of luxuries, a small piece of chocolate that Donna had found at the bottom of her bag and divided into 8 pieces no larger than a thumbnail, I tried to describe what I'd seen. "He looked almost normal," I said, "from a distance. Polo shirt, khakis. If he'd been walking on a regular street, you wouldn't have looked twice." "Until you saw the face," Gary said. "Until you saw the face." Are they getting worse?" Caitlin asked. She said it carefully, the way she asks questions when she's already thought about them for a while. "What do you mean by worse?" "Like, are they decaying? Getting more?" She made a gesture. "Possibly. I don't know. It's only been a week. Because if they decay, then eventually—" "Don't get your hopes up about that yet," Trish said, gently. "We don't know enough about what they are to predict that." Caitlin nodded and looked at her soup. I looked at Trish over Caitlin's head, and Trish gave me a small, not particularly reassuring look that said, I was being kind, not accurate, which I'd suspected. 10 days in. "I need to tell you about the radio transmissions." We'd been in regular contact with Station 12. The man I was talking to turned out to be a full-time captain named Jack Adler. He gave me his name eventually, though it took a few days, which I understood. You don't hand out your name easily when you don't know who you're handing it to. Jack Adler, Merton Township Fire Station 12, 41 years in the department, 2 years from retirement when this happened, which he mentioned exactly once, and then never mentioned again. Jack was good on the radio. Precise, calm, the way someone gets after decades of emergency work. He'd stopped treating every piece of bad information as something that required an emotional response, and instead just filed it and moved on. We traded information, troop levels, as Frank had taken to calling them, supply status, weather. A statewide weather radio was still broadcasting from an automated station somewhere, so we got reliable forecasts. Road conditions, insofar as either of us had intel on that. On day 10, Jack said something that changed things. Station 7. "I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer." "Go ahead." "How many of your people are trained responders?" "Not volunteers, actual trained." "One volunteer. Me." "Frank is former Army, 30+ years. Gary has no formal training, but he's steady. The others are civilian." "Your diesel mechanic experience covers what exactly?" "Heavy equipment, fire apparatus." "I know these engines better than most," I said. "Why?" "Because I've been thinking about what I said last week. 3 units. I remember. If you had 3 operational units, and we had 2, he stopped. "We're in Merton Township. The county fire training facility is also in Merton Township, you know?" I did know. The Harlow County Regional Fire Training Center was about 6 miles northeast of Harlow city limits, on the Merton Township side. It was a standalone facility, its own building, its own fuel storage, its own supply inventory for training exercises. It also had dormitory space for up to 40 people, a commercial kitchen, a backup generator, a water tower. "That's a better location than either of ours," I said. "Yes. It's also about 3 miles from here, and about 43 from you." "What are you thinking?" I'm thinking about the winter, Jack said. It's March now. We've got 6 months before it gets cold again. 6 months to get to a place where we can actually ride out a winter. The training center. The training center. I thought about it. 43 miles. The streets between here and there, I didn't know what they looked like. Downtown Harlow was bad. That much we knew from Frank's observations, and the smoke that had been rising from the north since day one. The highway might be different, or it might be worse. I'd need to know what's between us, I said. I've been trying to raise other stations between here and there. Nothing so far, but we haven't tried everything. Give me a day or two to think about it. Talk to my people. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. A pause. Dale, there's another thing. What's that? We've been picking up some transmissions. Not on a standard channel. I had to modify our handheld to even receive it. Numbers. A sequence that repeats every 23 minutes. Something moved in my chest that I couldn't identify. Numbers. Just numbers. 1 through maybe 15. Different sequences. Then a pause. Then again. Where's it coming from? Can't tell. But it's consistent. It's not random. Someone's sending it. Someone with equipment is sending it. That's all we know. What direction? Best I can tell, it's... And he gave a compass bearing that didn't quite make sense geographically, that pointed roughly toward a cluster of smaller towns southwest of Merton. But that's a guess. We don't have proper direction-finding equipment. Copy that, I said. Keep a log of the sequences. Already doing it. I signed off and sat in the watchroom for a while, long enough that the afternoon light started going sideways through the north windows and striping across the concrete floor. Bryce came up with 2 cups of coffee. Real coffee. We were rationing it. 2 cups per person per day, and sat in the corner with his legal pad. You heard all that? I said. Yeah. Thoughts? He thought about it seriously, the way he does when he forgets to pretend not to care. The number transmissions are weird. Yeah, because if you were just trying to communicate, you'd say something, not numbers. Could be a code. Could be, or it could be something automated, like a machine running a sequence because someone programmed it to. Why would someone program a machine to broadcast number sequences? I don't know, Bryce said, but I want to find out. I looked at my son, 16 years old, hoodie, the same dark eyes as his mother, currently holding a legal pad full of meticulous observation logs and asking good questions about coded transmissions. Don't tell your mom I'm considering this yet, I said. He made a face that somehow communicated both, I already knew you'd say that, and I'm not sure that's a good idea, without saying either. On day 12, the National Guard showed up, or what I thought was the National Guard. Frank spotted them from the watchroom at about noon, 2 military-style trucks, olive drab, coming south on Canal Road. They stopped in front of the station. 6 men got out, all in Army combat uniform, ACUs, with rifles. They stood in the street looking at the building. Don't respond yet, Frank said. We watched from the watchroom windows. The men were organized, moving with what looked like military discipline. Their gear looked right. Their uniforms looked right. One of them came to the bay door and knocked. 3 times hard. I went to the intercom. We had a 2-way intercom on the main bay door, older model, still worked. Who's there? Sergeant Roark, 178th Infantry. We've got survivors in the truck, looking for a secure location. I looked at Frank. Frank's face was doing something I'd never quite seen on it before. A kind of controlled neutrality that was different from his usual calm. Ask him the unit designation again, he said. Say again your unit, I said into the intercom. 178th Infantry Brigade. Ohio National Guard, Harlow County deployment. I looked at Frank again. The 178th is based out of Columbus, Frank said quietly. For a Harlow County activation, they'd typically pull from the 166th. Could be they're short on local units. Could be not. What would you want to ask them? Ask about their chain of command. What officer sent them? What their specific orders are? I asked. The reply took a moment. Then, we're operating under emergency provisions. COC is degraded. We're doing what we can with what we have. What's the name of your CO? Another pause. Lieutenant Greer is the senior officer I reported to before contact was lost. Frank's face hadn't changed. Believable but not checkable, he said. Should we let them in? He thought for a long time. Long enough that I started thinking he was going to say no. Let's see the trucks, he said. Tell them to pull the trucks around to the east side. The bay windows there, we can see into the cargo area from the second floor. I told them that. Gave the reason as wanting to assess whether there was room for their vehicles inside. They did it. Drove the trucks around the east side of the building. Stopped broadside. We looked out the second floor window. 8 people in the back of the second truck. Women, an older man, 2 kids. They looked frightened and exhausted and completely, genuinely civilian. A couple of them looked up at the window, and one of the women actually pressed her hands together like a prayer. The first truck, the one the soldiers had ridden in, I couldn't see into. But one of the soldiers was standing next to it, and I could see him clearly. His rifle. It was right. His uniform was right. The patch on his sleeve was... I looked, and the problem was I didn't know the patches well enough to know if it was right. But his boots were wrong. I almost missed it. Frank didn't. Those aren't army boots, Frank said. I looked again. The boots were tan, military style, but they were the commercial kind, not the issue kind. Could be nothing. People wear non-issue footwear all the time, especially in National Guard situations, where supply is imperfect. But combined with the pause on the unit designation, combined with the uncertainty about the CO's name, we let the civilians in, I said, not the soldiers. They won't agree to that. Maybe not. Let's find out. I went to the intercom. Sergeant Rokes, we can take your civilians. We don't have the capacity for armed personnel on top of our existing group. Long pause. We don't separate from the civilians. I understand that. But I'm not opening this station to 6 armed men I can't verify. You can remain outside. The area directly east of the station has been consistently clear. If you want, we can work out a rotation where we take the civilians inside and you maintain external security. A very long pause this time. Give us a minute. They talked among themselves. I couldn't hear what they said. I watched from the window, trying to read postures. One of them was clearly the leader, and he was clearly not happy with the offer, and one of the others seemed to be arguing with him. Then the leader, Rohark or whoever he was, walked back to the intercom. We accept on condition of radio contact and resupply access. We can discuss terms once the civilians are inside. Agreed? Agreed. We opened the east side door, the one Gary and I had bolted with angle iron, which we unbolted for the occasion, and brought the 8 civilians in. 2 women, 1 man maybe 70, 2 teenage girls, 1 boy maybe 8, and a middle-aged couple who turned out to be named Larry and Barbara Stout. The soldiers stayed outside. As agreed. I had Gary and Frank watch from the second floor as I sat with the new arrivals in Bay 2, and Trish assessed whether any of them were hurt or sick. Donna appeared with water bottles and a quiet efficiency that I appreciated. Here's what the Stouts told me, after about 20 minutes of basic questions. They'd been sheltering in the Harlow Community Center on the north side of town. About 40 people there in the first few days. The soldiers had shown up on day 8, saying they were National Guard, providing security. Everything had seemed fine. Then on day 10, the lead soldier had told the group that they needed to consolidate, move to a better location. They'd loaded onto the trucks. Where were you going? I asked. Larry Stout looked at his wife. They said a staging area. Northeast, they said. 40 miles. I felt something shift in my understanding of the situation, but I couldn't see its shape clearly yet. Did they tell you the specific address? No. When we asked, they said it was secure, and they'd tell us when we arrived. And then? And then we saw this building, and Sergeant Rokark told us he needed to make a stop. To pick up supplies, he said. I looked at the east side window. The 2 trucks were still parked out there. I could see the shapes of the soldiers through the glass, moving around. Trish, I said quietly, when we were out of the new arrivals' earshot. Any of them bitten, injured, sick? No. They're hungry, and scared, but they're healthy. Good. I went up to the watchroom and keyed the radio. Jack Adler answered on the second try. Jack, I need to ask you something. You know a Sergeant Rourke, 178th Infantry. A pause. Don't know the name. Why? We've got 6 armed men outside my door, claiming to be National Guard, 178th. They were escorting civilians from a shelter on the north side of town. The 178th wouldn't be in your county. Wrong AOR. That's what Frank said. Frank's right. If they're Guard, they'd be 166th. If they're 178th, they're from Columbus, and they'd have to have been specifically deployed to your county, which would be unusual without some major activation. And if they're not Guard, another pause. Who else would have ACUs and military trucks? A prison, I said. It had just crystallized. We've got a county jail about 8 miles north of here. They had at least 2 armored transport vehicles on their fleet. Jack was quiet for a moment. Or private security. Or even just civilians who raided a military surplus or a Guard armory. Or former inmates who took the trucks. Or that. What are they doing right now? Standing outside. And what do you want to do? I thought about it. I want to find out who they are without getting anyone shot. That's the right answer, Jack said. How are you going to do it? Not sure yet. Give me an hour. Here's what I did. I went to the east side window and knocked on the glass and gestured for the man calling himself Rojark to come to the window. He did. I cracked it open 2 inches, enough to talk through. Rojark, I need to be straight with you. I have people inside, and I'm responsible for them. I can't do that responsibly without knowing exactly who you are. He looked at me for a moment. He was maybe 35, heavy-set, calm-eyed. We're what we said we are. Then you won't have any problem telling me your full name, rank, and service number. A beat. Rokark, David Allen, Sergeant, E5. Service number. Another beat. It was short, but it was there. I don't have that memorized. Most long-service active or Guard have their service number memorized. I'm National Guard, not regular Army. Your unit patch, I said. Show me. He showed me. I looked at it carefully. It had the right shape, the right color scheme, but the details were off. The stitching was too clean on a patch that should have been on a deployed uniform for weeks. And the number on it was wrong. Not wrong in a way I could articulate precisely, just wrong in the way that something assembled by someone who doesn't fully know what they're assembling is wrong. Okay, I said. Thank you. I stepped back from the window. Frank was right there. Well, patch is wrong. Either they printed it themselves or grabbed it somewhere without knowing what it was supposed to look like. So what are they? I don't know. Not active Guard, not the way they're presenting. I thought for a second. Could still be decent people. Doesn't matter who you were before. What matters now is what you're doing. They've been decent to those 8 civilians. Yeah, they have. What do you want to do? I chewed on it. They know where we are. They're outside and armed. If we tell them to leave, we make enemies we don't need. If we let them in, we've got 6 armed men of unknown background in the building. Outside armed men are harder to manage than inside ones, Frank said. If they're inside, I can watch them. You think you can watch 6 people? I've done more. I looked at him. You want to bring them in? I want them where I can see them, he said, which is the same thing. We talked it over with Gary in the far corner of Bay 2. Gary's view. Let them in. Put them on rotation. They get food and shelter in exchange for work. Gary is a practical man. He also said, with a directness I appreciated, if they were going to be a problem, they'd have already been a problem. They had 8 people in that truck who they could have used any way they wanted. They were feeding them. That was the thing I'd kept coming back to. I went back to the window. Rowark, I'll open the bay door. You come in. You give me your weapons to hold. In storage. Not confiscated, you can access them in an emergency. And you work for room and board. You tell me who you actually are. I'm not interested in whatever reason you had to take the uniforms. I'm interested in whether you're going to make trouble. A very long silence. How do you know about the uniforms? I've been looking at things long enough to know when something isn't what it says it is. He thought about it. A genuine conversation happened among the 6 of them outside, and I could see from the body language that it wasn't uniform. Some were for it, some weren't. Eventually, Roscork turned back to the window. "We took them from a guard armory," he said. "We thought it would." He stopped. "Make people take us seriously. I understand. We're not." Another stop. "We're not what you probably think. I think you're 6 people trying to survive, who made a decision about presentation that seemed smart and turned out to be complicated. Am I wrong?" He met my eyes. "No." "Then come inside." Their real names: David Rotark, who was actually a former county deputy who'd been off duty when things collapsed; Tom Ferris, who'd worked at the county road department; Kevin Slater, Pete Walsh, Andy Novak, all civilians with various backgrounds, mostly construction and trades; and one woman who'd been with them since day 3, named Claire Hayes, who turned out to be a pharmacist. A pharmacist. I almost grabbed Trish's arm. Claire Hayes had been at her pharmacy on the north side when things started, had gathered everything she could fit in 2 large duffel bags: prescription medications, medical supplies, professional-grade equipment, and had barricaded herself in the back until Rourke and Tom Ferris had found her on day 2. She'd been with them since. The uniforms had been her idea, she admitted. She'd suggested they look official so people would trust them. "Did it work?" Gary asked. She thought about it. "Mostly. Until now." I brought her over to Trish. They started talking in the specific fast shorthand of medical professionals, comparing inventories, and I left them to it. We now had 16 people: a county deputy, a road worker, 3 tradesmen, a pharmacist, a retired military man, a mechanic couple, a librarian, a nurse, me, and 4 kids. Plus Larry and Barbara Stout and the others who'd been in the truck. I stood in Bay 1 and looked at all of them and thought, this is too many people for what we have. Then I thought, this is also exactly the right number of people for what we need to become. The second supply run after the new arrivals joined was the biggest one we'd done. I organized it like a proper operation, which was a phrase I used out loud, and Frank gave me a small nod of approval. 3 vehicles. My truck, Gary's truck, the brush truck from Bay 2, which Tom Ferris turned out to know how to drive because he'd driven similar equipment at the road department. Me, Frank, Gary, Roark, Tom, Andy. 6 people, 3 vehicles. Target, the large grocery warehouse store on the south end of State Route 9, which was a wholesale place that supplied restaurants and institutions. I'd shopped there twice for the shop, back when things were normal. It was the biggest food inventory within reasonable range. It was also on the south side of town, which was worse than the east side. We went on day 15, morning, early. Took the highway bypass to avoid as much of town as possible. The highway was strange, a lot of abandoned cars, but spread out enough that we could navigate through, and almost no movement. I think whatever density of infection existed, it was concentrated in the residential and commercial areas, rather than the highway, which made sense. The highway was where people had tried to leave, not where people had sheltered. The warehouse store was a large flat-top building behind a big paved lot. The lot had maybe 30 of them in it when we pulled up. Not 50, not 100, 30, scattered across an area the size of a football field. I stopped the truck at the edge of the lot, and we watched for 5 minutes. "They're not clustered," Frank said. "No obvious attractor." "We need to get around to the loading dock," I said. "That's the east side of the building. If we can get to it without—" "We make noise," Rokirk said. "Draw them away." I looked at him. "One vehicle," he said, "goes to the north side of the lot, lays on the horn, draws them north. Then the other 2 have a clear shot to the loading dock on the east side. That leaves whoever's in the noise vehicle exposed. They stay in the vehicle, just honk, and then drive out before the crowd gets there." I thought about it. It was a good plan, in the way that a simple machine is good. Minimal parts, predictable mechanics, exploits a known behavior. "Who volunteers?" "I'll do it," Tom Ferris said. You sure? Yeah, I'm good with the truck. I'll go north, honk. Pull out before they get close. Meet you at the dock. We did it. Tom went north, hit the horn. It was like watching a magnet work. Every one of the 30 immediately oriented north and started moving. Not fast, not coordinated, just that same inexorable weighted drift toward the sound. Tom gave it 20 seconds, enough for the crowd to be properly committed in the wrong direction, then drove out north and circled around. Gary and I went east. The loading dock was on the east wall, 3 bays, shutters down. I jumped out, put the bolt cutters to the shutter lock on the center bay, got it open in about 40 seconds. The shutters rolled up manually, and we were in. The warehouse was exactly what I'd hoped. Commercial quantities, pallets of canned goods, thousands of cans, industrial sizes, 50-pound sacks of rice and flour and dried beans, cooking oils in commercial jugs, salt, sugar, vinegar, spices, cases of soup, massive containers of oatmeal. Also, cleaning supplies, paper goods, batteries, propane canisters, a rack of commercial first aid kits. We loaded for 45 minutes. At the 40-minute mark, Tom honked twice from outside. Signal that something was moving toward us. We loaded what we had, got the shutters down, drove out. We came back with more supplies than we could properly store. We were in the station for 4 hours, figuring out where to put everything, which was actually a good problem to have. Donna surveyed the hall and said, "We're okay for 3 months. Maybe 4 at strict rationing. 3 months. The weight of those words. I felt something I hadn't felt in 15 days. The luxury of a little time. Here's what the station looked like by the end of the 3rd week. Bay 1. The active fire engine. Fully fueled, maintained, ready. Along the walls, fuel storage cans, spare parts inventory that Gary and I had organized, the generator that we'd gotten running reliably, with a new voltage regulator I'd pulled from the spare parts bin. The generator ran on a modified cycle, 4 hours on in the morning, 2 hours on in the evening, saving fuel and extending our supply. Bay 2, brush truck, also fueled and maintained. The floor space around it had become our main storage area. Shelves built from 2x4s and plywood from a building supply run on day 18. Everything organized, labeled in Patty's careful handwriting. She'd gotten hold of a marker and a roll of masking tape and labeled absolutely everything, which I appreciated more than I can say. Bay 3, the Arrow, still in restoration, but actually coming along. I'd been working on it in spare hours. There weren't many, but there were some, usually right after the generator went off in the morning, when I was still too wired from the early watch to sleep. I got the pump reinstalled on day 16. The engine needed a fuel system flush, and the rear differential was a mess, but it was coming together. 2nd floor. Bunk room now had 12 people sleeping in it. We'd built additional sleeping platforms along 2 of the walls. Simple plywood bunks. Not comfortable but functional. Caitlin and Bryce were in the office, which had become the family room. We'd pushed the desks to the walls and laid down sleeping bags. Watch room. Bryce's legal pad, now 3/4 full, lived on the desk. The radio ran continuously on reduced volume. We'd established a 3 times daily check-in with Jack Adler, and the Channel 13 frequency was monitored constantly. Kitchen. Donna's domain. She'd organized it like a field kitchen. Everything in its place. Meal schedule on the wall. Rationing chart on the cabinet. She was remarkable with limited ingredients. There was a morning I smelled something that was unmistakably pancakes, and I stood at the kitchen door and stared at her, and she said, "Dried egg powder and some of that cooking oil," and we were out of syrup, so I made a sugar syrup, and I just said thank you, and she shrugged like it was nothing. Outside, the perimeter. This had become Frank and Roke's project, which surprised me. They'd started talking on day 18 and found common ground in a shared interest in perimeter security. Roskork had county law enforcement training, and Frank had 3 decades of Army experience, and between them, they'd designed a low-profile warning system, fishing lines strung at knee height around the perimeter of the elevated apron, connected to small clusters of metal washers, that would rattle if disturbed. Not loud enough to attract attention from the street. Loud enough to wake someone sleeping 20 feet away. It worked. On day 20, something triggered the northeast line at 3 a.m. Frank was on watch, heard it, looked out the second-floor window. 3 of them on the apron, just standing there. They'd wandered up the curb cut and onto the raised concrete. Frank stayed still, we all stayed still, and after about 20 minutes they wandered back off. The question that came up after that was whether we needed something more active, whether just staying still was always going to be enough, or whether we needed a way to handle things that got on the apron without making noise. Roark and Frank had separate opinions on this, that were both right in different ways. Frank's view was that we should develop silent options, long-handled tools, nothing that makes a sound. Roark's view was that active defense without firearms was risky for untrained people. They argued about it for 2 days in the respectful way of 2 people who take the argument seriously, and then they compromised. Basic tool training, not fighting, just emergency crowd management, for anyone willing to learn. I taught it. Not because I had the most expertise, Frank did, but because I'm a mechanic, and mechanics explain things in terms of physics and leverage, which turns out to be how you explain what to do with a long-handled pike pole when something that used to be a person is walking toward you. We didn't need it that week, but we practiced. Day 22. Frank came down from the watchroom at about 7 in the morning and found me in Bay 3 with my hands inside the Arrow's engine compartment. "You need to come up," he said. His voice was off. Not scared. Frank doesn't scare, but something in it. Right now? Yeah. I wiped my hands on a rag and followed him up the stairs. The watchroom had 3 other people in it already. Roark, who'd been on the previous watch, and Bryce and Gary, who'd apparently been up early for unrelated reasons and had seen the same thing. To the south, the strip mall parking lot. Day 7, there'd been 40 of them there. By day 14, the count had dropped. Frank's log said 31, then 28, then 22, over successive watches. We'd been tracking the decline, and I'd allowed myself the cautious thought that maybe they were dispersing, moving on, whatever it is they do when there's no consistent attractor. The count on the morning of day 22 was not 22. Bryce said it first, reading from his legal pad. I counted 86. 86, Frank said. Maybe more. They're stacked in the back corners of the lot, and I can't see them all. Where did they come from? Gary said. Something drove them south, Roque said. Something north of us that spooked them, made noise, pushed them this way. I thought about the smoke from the north that had been a constant presence since day 1, that had thinned in the last week. What if the north is burning out? I said. What if the concentrated population there is moving? Moving south, Frank said. Dispersing. 86 isn't dispersed, Bryce said. That's concentrated. He was right. I looked out the window. The strip mall parking lot was about 200 yards away, too far to see detail clearly, close enough to see numbers. They were there. They weren't moving toward us, but they were there. We need to go to the training center, I said. The room was quiet. I've been putting off saying that, I continued, because the supply situation improved and it felt like we were stable. But stable here means 86 of them 200 yards away and growing. We don't know they're growing, Gary said. We know the north is pushing them south. We know the training center is northeast. We know it's a better facility with more capacity. I looked around the room, and we know Jack Adler is 43 miles away, and he's got 5 people, and he's been talking about this for 2 weeks. 43 miles through what? Gary said. That's the question. That's what I need to figure out. How do you figure that out without going out there and finding out? The radio, Bryce said. He'd been quiet during most of this. If we push out on the mutual aid channels, broaden the scan, try to raise anyone between here and Merton, we might get some picture of what the road looks like. That could take days. Or we do it and scan for a day and see what we get and make a decision based on that. He shrugged. Better than guessing. I looked at my son, the legal pad, the 3 weeks of careful observation. Yeah, I said, that's right. That's what we do. We spent 2 days scanning. Bryce and I, mostly, in shifts, working through every frequency on the dispatch radio, throwing calls out on every mutual aid channel we had. Gary modified the hand crank radio from the camping supplies section and got it operational, giving us a second scanning capability on a different set of frequencies. We raised 5 contacts in those 2 days. Contact 1, a woman named Elaine, sheltering in a house on the east side of Harlow, with her daughter and an elderly neighbor. She'd been there since day 1. They were okay, but running out of food. I got her address and told her we'd come for her. I meant it. Contact 2, a man whose name I couldn't quite catch, somewhere in the radio static, who said he was at a church in Millville. Millville is about 12 miles west, not between us and Merton, but at least a data point. Contact 3, a teenager who gave his name as Ryan, who was broadcasting from somewhere that sounded like a car. I could hear engine noise, and who was looking for his parents. I gave him the station's address and told him to come when it was safe. I don't know if he ever did. Contact 4, nothing useful, just a looping recorded message from what sounded like an emergency management system, telling people to shelter in place and await official guidance. It had been looping for 3 weeks, apparently. Contact 5, this was the one. A woman, short range, on a frequency I hadn't expected to find traffic on. Clear voice, steady, not scared, or not showing it. Any station on the line, this is Dr. Rebecca Finch, Harlow County Hospital, responding to broadcast. Come back. I sat up straight and grabbed the mic. Dr. Finch, this is Station 7. We are receiving you. Over. A pause. Station 7. I can barely hear you. Are you? Is this on Harlow County Fire Mutual Aid? Channel 13. How are you reaching this? I have a radio from the ambulance bay. I've been trying channels for 3 days. Can you? Are you at Station 7? On Canal Road? That's right. How many at your location? 12. We've been in the hospital basement since. A break in transmission. Basement level 3. I'm another break, infectious disease physician. I have supplies. This is important. I have data. Data on what? On the infected. On what's happening to them. Her voice was careful in the way of someone who has decided to be precise instead of emotional. I need to tell someone who can use it. I looked at Bryce. He was already writing. Dr. Finch, give me your exact location inside the building. Basement level 3. The old record storage. There's a fire door on the south stairwell. Red handle. The main hospital is not safe, but the basement has been secure. The infected don't use stairs well. They don't understand stairs. We've had no incursions to B3 in 11 days. Can you hold for another 48 hours? Yes. But some of my people are. There's a boy here. He's 12. And she stopped. Can you come? I'm going to try to come, I said. Don't move from B3. What's your radio schedule? I'm on every 2 hours, even numbered hours, starting at 0600. I'll contact you at 0800 tomorrow. Stay safe, doctor. Please come, she said. And then the transmission ended. I put the mic down. The watchroom was very quiet. The hospital is on the north side of downtown, Frank said. He'd come in partway through the transmission. Yeah, that's the worst direction. Yeah. Can you get there? Don't know yet. I thought about the route. The highway bypass had been clear enough. But the hospital was downtown, not accessible from the bypass without cutting back through streets. There's a service road on the east side of the medical campus. It connects to Industrial Boulevard, which connects to the bypass. How do you know that? I've done truck deliveries to the hospital loading dock. I know the east side of that building. So you could theoretically approach from the east, from the bypass, via Industrial, without going through downtown. Theoretically. Dale. Patty was in the doorway. She'd heard enough. An infectious disease doctor who's been studying these things for 3 weeks. I know. And 12 people in a hospital basement. I know that too. When do we go? I turned and looked at my wife. She was holding a coffee mug with both hands. practical as always, not asking me whether but when. Day 24, I said. I need 1 day to prep. Day 23 was the prep day. I pulled the Pierce Saber fully out of Bay 1 and did a complete mechanical check. I didn't find any problems. The engine was sound, I knew that. But I did it anyway, because it's what I do before I ask a vehicle to do something important. I also welded additional steel plate onto the front brush guard. Not a proper ram bar, nothing designed for impact, but an extra layer of steel on the leading face just in case. We'd gotten the Aero to a state of rough operability during the previous week. I'd finished the fuel system flush, and the differential was back together and running. Rough, but running. It wasn't ready for anything demanding, but it could move under its own power, and that mattered for what I was thinking. Frank sat with me in the bay that evening, while I finished the last checks and talked through the plan. 2 vehicles, I said. The Saber in front, the brush truck following. I drive the Saber. Roach drives the brush truck because he's the one with law enforcement driving experience. Who's in each vehicle? Me, you, and Gary in the Saber. Roach and Andy Novak in the brush truck. What about the hospital approach? We take the bypass to Industrial Boulevard. Industrial to the hospital service road. The service road ends at the east loading dock. Same dock I've delivered to before. If the road is blocked, we reassess. What are we looking for once we're there? Dr. Finch said south stairwell, red handle, fire door. That should be accessible from the loading dock area. How do we get 12 people out of a basement and into 2 vehicles? The Saber has the crew cab and the running board. We can take 7 or 8. The brush truck can take 4, maybe 5. That's 12. That's exactly 12. Yeah, so let's hope I counted right. I tightened the last bolt on the brush guard. Frank, if something goes wrong, you take over. He didn't respond right away. What do you mean by that? If I'm not functional. If something happens and I'm not the one making decisions, you take over. Not Gary. Not Rourke. You. Why me specifically? Because you're the most capable person in this building, except for situations where being a mechanic matters, and Gary covers those. I set down the wrench. Also because everyone here follows your lead already, even if they don't realize it. He was quiet. I'll stay in the watchroom tonight. Keep an eye on the south. 86. Last count was 91. He said it without drama. They're not moving toward us, but they're accumulating. Day 24, I said. We go. We get the doctor and her people. We come back. And then we have a very direct conversation about whether staying here long-term is actually viable. It's not, he said. No, I agreed, but one thing at a time. Day 24, 6:30 in the morning. I raised Dr. Finch on the radio at 0800, confirmed she was still in B3, confirmed the approach route. Her voice sounded different than the day before. Not worse, just more steady, like she'd made a decision about being calm and was holding to it. We rolled out at 9. The bypass was the same as the warehouse run. Abandoned vehicles, some wreckage, no active movement. Tom Ferris held down the station with Pete Walsh, and Kevin Slater, and Claire Hayes, and Donna, and the kids. Gary had given Tom about 20 minutes of instructions on the watchroom radio and the perimeter warning system. Industrial Boulevard off the bypass was a wide road that ran through a light industrial zone. Warehouses, a sheet metal fabricator, a car wash. The road was mostly clear. One car had gone into a ditch on the right side. We passed a loading dock where somebody had left a forklift running, still audible from the road, still running on its propane with nobody near it. The noise it was making meant there were maybe 15 of them standing in the parking lot around it, not doing anything, just drawn to the noise. We did not stop. The hospital service road turned off industrial at what used to be a guardhouse, now empty, the gate arm up and locked in the open position. We went through. The service road ran along the east side of the medical campus, separated from the main hospital by a service court. Loading docks, utility access, the mechanical plant for the building's HVAC. The loading dock was clear. I put the Saber against the dock and shut the engine off. The sudden quiet was very loud. Frank, you and Gary watch the approach road. Anyone comes, we move fast. Roark and I went to the dock door on foot. The fire door with the red handle was at the bottom of the stairwell, just past the dock, exactly where Finch had said it was. I knocked. 3 times, then a pause, then 2 more. We'd agreed on that pattern over the radio. A long moment. Then the sound of bolts being undone, several of them. Then the door swung open. A woman, 50-ish, short, dark hair with a good amount of gray in it, wearing a doctor's coat that had seen better days, blue circles under her eyes. She looked at me and then at Roark, and then past us at the vehicles. "Fire department," she said. It wasn't a question. "Close enough," I said. "Are you Dr. Finch?" "Yes." "You're Dale?" "That's me." "Are all 12 ready to move?" 11. "We lost one on day 15. A man named Howard. She stopped. "Yes." 11. "I'll get them." She turned back into the stairwell and called up. Something I couldn't hear clearly. Then the sound of movement above. They came down in a straggle. A young nurse still in scrubs. 2 elderly patients who'd clearly been hospitalized when everything happened, and who were moving slowly on unsteady legs. A couple of what looked like hospital administrative staff. A young man I didn't know, and a boy. 12 years old, maybe? Dark-haired, thin, wearing a Harlow County Medical Center patient bracelet on his wrist. "Mitchell," Dr. Finch said, taking the boy's shoulder. "Stay close to me." I helped the elderly patients across the dock. The young nurse, her name turned out to be Jo, short for Josephine, was steady and efficient, and helped the second elderly patient without being asked. We loaded the Sabre full, 8 people, pressed together in the crew cab and on the running boards for the short drive. I told them it was only 2 blocks of service road. Andy Novak and the young man and 2 others went in the brush truck. We pulled out. I made the turn from the service road onto Industrial and almost immediately had to brake. There were 9 of them on Industrial Boulevard. Not where they'd been before. Those had been clustered around the forklift, which was still running distantly to the north. These were new, farther south. They'd been moving south along the road, drawn by what I didn't know, and now our engine noise brought their heads up. 9 is not 40. 9 is not 91. "Keep moving," Roark said over the radio. "Keep moving. Don't stop." I pressed the accelerator and held the line. The Sabre is a big vehicle. 3 of them were in the road itself, and I drove through the gap between them and the ditch at about 30 miles an hour. Not fast enough to lose control, fast enough to be past them before they could react. None of them got near us. They don't run, not the ones I've seen. They drift and they walk and they orient, and then they arrive wherever they're going, eventually, and in the meantime you've already left. Roark cleared the same gap behind me, brush truck engine growling on the acceleration. We were on the bypass 4 minutes later. 20 minutes after that, we were back at Station 7. Dr. Rebecca Finch, infectious disease physician, 11 weeks into what she was careful not to call an apocalypse. She was specific in the way that doctors are specific. She had notes. An actual notebook, spiral-bound, densely written in handwriting, that was very small and very precise. She'd been keeping records from the first day. Patient observations, behavioral notes, physical progression. I'll try to summarize what she told us over the next 2 days, because it matters. The infection was spreading through bites and through fluid contact, which we'd figured. Not airborne. She was confident about that, or as confident as she could be without lab equipment, because the people in the basement who'd had no contact with infected individuals had not become infected. The infected were not getting better. That was the first important thing. Whatever had happened to their cognition, their self-direction, their capacity for anything resembling awareness, it wasn't temporary. She'd had 3 subjects early on where she'd hoped, and she said the word hoped in a way that told me something about what those weeks had been like, that they might stabilize, might recover some function. They had not. They had continued to deteriorate in one specific way while remaining stable in another. "The body doesn't shut down," she said. "Not the core systems. Heart, lungs, digestion, Basic motor function. Those continue. They eat. They consume tissue, when available. And whatever they consume, the body processes. They don't sleep exactly, but they have periods of reduced activity that might be analogous. They can be injured, and the injury doesn't kill them unless it's catastrophic. Brain destruction or complete cardiovascular failure. So they don't just fall apart, I said. Not on their own. No, not the way zombies in movies fall apart. She said the word zombies with a kind of professional discomfort, like using a slang term for something she'd rather call by its proper name. The degradation I've observed is more cognitive. Their responses become simpler over time, more purely reactive. Early in the progression, some subjects showed fragments of what might have been learned behavior. One kept returning to the same area repeatedly, possibly a familiar location, but those fragments disappear over time. How much time? Based on what I've observed, weeks. By 6 weeks, the last of whatever was left of volition seems to be gone. They become entirely stimulus response. Trish and Claire had come in to listen to this. Claire asked, "What about the numbers?" Finch looked at her. "What numbers?" I explained about the transmission Jack Adler had been picking up on the modified frequency, the repeating sequences on a 23-minute cycle. Finch was quiet for a moment. Where was the signal coming from? Directionally. I told her the compass bearing Jack had given me, the direction southwest of Merton. She was quiet again, longer this time. "What?" I said. "Southwest of Merton Township, about 28 miles southwest of Merton." She was looking at her notebook, not at me. "There's a CDC satellite facility there. They call it a Level 2 field station. It's basically a small research facility, not the full containment of a Level 4, but it has equipment, it has people, or it had people. You know about it?" "I've done consultation work with them. I've been there 3 times. She looked up. "A number transmission on a repeating cycle. That's an automated system, a heartbeat signal, something programmed to broadcast continuously as long as power is maintained." "Why would they broadcast a number sequence?" "I don't know what the sequence is," she said, "but if I had to guess, it's a data ping, an automated report. Could be environmental readings, could be monitoring data. Something that a system keeps broadcasting because it was programmed to keep broadcasting whether or not anyone is actively running the facility. Meaning the facility might be running on its own. Meaning there might be equipment there that nobody's been home to turn off." I sat with that. "Or," she said carefully, "there might be people there, people with lab equipment and containment capacity, who have been there this whole time and who are broadcasting a signal because they want to be found." I radioed Jack that evening. "Jack, we need to talk about the transmission." "Go ahead." "The southwest bearing. Is there any chance you could get a more precise fix on it? Do you have any direction-finding capability at all?" "We've got a basic VHF DF unit in the storeroom. Haven't used it in years. Let me check if it still works. Also, have you been keeping logs of the sequences? Everything. What's the repeat interval?" 23 minutes, 17 seconds. Almost exactly. Dr. Finch, who was in the room with me, wrote in her notebook and didn't look up. "I've got an infectious disease physician here," I told Jack. "She knows about a CDC field station southwest of Merton, about 28 miles southwest." Silence on the other end. "Jack." "Still here. I'm doing the math. 28 miles southwest of me. That's roughly 45 miles from you. You can access it without going through Harlow City. Maybe if the roads are clear, which I don't know." A pause. "Dale. Yeah. I want to tell you something I haven't told you before. We've been doing reconnaissance. Small runs. Limited range. One of my guys has been out twice on the county roads north of here. And? It's not as bad as the city. The density is much lower on the county roads. We found a gas station on Route 9 that was basically untouched. Nobody had been there. Filled both trucks. Looted the store for supplies. No contact. What are you saying?" "I'm saying I think the route to that facility might be possible. I think a convoy, a proper convoy with your apparatus, might make it. A convoy would mean you coming to me first, or me coming to you, or meeting in the middle somewhere. I thought about it. The 86 in the strip mall to the south, now 91. The winter Jack had been talking about for 2 weeks. Dr. Finch's notebook full of data, and the CDC facility with its automated heartbeat signal. Let me think about it, I said. I know. I just needed to say it out loud. Jack, how are your people? A pause, holding, worried, asking me questions I don't always have answers to. You? Same. Keeps you humble, he said. Station 12 out. Day 27. The thing with Frank happened on day 27, and I'm going to write it down here, because it needs to be written down, and because I want to be accurate about it. Frank had been complaining about his shoulder for 4 or 5 days. He said he'd wrenched it moving a supply pallet, and I'd believed him because he carried a supply pallet wrong, the way everyone who's not a mechanic carries things wrong, and I'd been meaning to ask Trish to look at it and kept forgetting. Trish found me on the morning of day 27. She pulled me out of Bay 3, where I was finishing the arrow, pulled me by the arm, which was unusual for Trish, who's not a grabbing person. His left shoulder, she said. I know, I meant to. No, she cut me off. Come and look. Frank was in the kitchen. He was sitting at the table with his jacket off. Trish had clearly told him to take it off, and he was sitting with the expression of a man submitting to an examination he'd been putting off. The left shoulder had a wound. Old, 8, maybe 9 days old based on the state of it. Trish had cleaned it, and I could see clearly what it was. Bite mark. Human, or formerly human. 2 arcs, partial upper and lower. The kind you get when something grabs you and gets partially through before you pull away. About 1.5 inches long on the major arc. Frank looked at me without any particular expression. I sat down across from him. How long? I said. Day 18, the east side inspection. I went around the building with you and I got too close to the northeast corner and something got me. Contact lasted about a second. I got loose. You didn't tell us. No. Frank. I know. Why? He thought about it with the same evenness he brings to everything. Because I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't want to create a situation until I knew. And now? Now it's been 9 days. He looked at his shoulder. I don't feel different. Trish spoke. Her voice was careful but direct. Dr. Finch. Yes, I said. We brought Dr. Finch. She examined the wound with the thoroughness of someone who doesn't let herself skip steps. She asked Frank questions. When, what exactly he remembered of the contact, whether any fluid had entered the wound, how he'd treated it immediately. She looked at his eyes, at his gum tissue, took his pulse. She asked him to track her finger with his eyes. Then she sat back and wrote in her notebook. I don't know, she said. That's the honest answer. I have seen individuals who were bitten and did not turn. I have seen individuals who were bitten and did. I don't have enough data to say what the factors are. It's possible there are people who are partially or fully resistant. It's possible the depth of the wound matters. It's possible something about the condition of the infecting individual matters. 9 days, Frank said. 9 days is meaningful, she said. Everyone I observed who was going to turn did so within 72 hours. Most within 24. 9 days without showing any symptoms of change it's longer than I would have expected if you were infected. Frank absorbed this. So I might be fine. You might be fine. I want to monitor you closely for the next week, and I want to be honest with you about one more thing. She met his eyes. I can't tell you with certainty either way. Anyone who tells you they can is lying. I understand. She looked at me. And this is a conversation the group needs to have. I know. We had it that evening. All of us, in Bay 1, around the fire engine. I told people the facts. Frank sat through it, with the same undisturbed presence he always had. There was about 30 seconds of quiet when I finished. Then Bryce said, Frank watches my back on the night rotation. I want him to keep doing that. And that was more or less the end of the conversation. Not because nobody had concerns. I could see on some faces that there were concerns. but because Bryce saying that out loud in that specific way made it clear which direction the group was leaning, and the group trusted the lean. Frank looked at my son for a moment. He didn't say anything, but something in his face shifted, just a little. I need to tell you about the things I found at the CDC facility, because that's where this ends up, but I have to get there first. Day 30. The convoy decision. It came out of a meeting that I didn't call, but that happened anyway. People have a way of gathering in the kitchen when something needs to be decided, which I think is a universal human constant that probably predates history. I came in for my morning coffee, and there were 12 people already in the kitchen, and the conversation was already going. The training center, Gary said, when I came in. Everyone here is for it, except for Larry and Barbara. Larry Stout was a careful man. I'm not against it, he said, correcting Gary with a patience that suggested he'd corrected him on this before. I'm against going without knowing what the route looks like. So we scout, I said. When? Now, today, me and one other person. Light vehicle, quiet, no fire apparatus. We go as far as we safely can and come back with information. Who goes with you? Bryce was leaning against the counter with his coffee. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Not him, Patty said immediately. Bryce didn't react to this. He'd expected it. I looked at him, then at Patty, then at Frank. Frank gave me the smallest possible nod. It wasn't a yes or a no. It was an acknowledgement that I was the one who got to decide. Rourke goes with me, I said. Former law enforcement, knows how to drive fast and quiet. We take Gary's truck. It's smaller than mine, less visible. Bryce looked at his coffee. Bryce, I said, watch room. I want a full log while I'm gone. Anything that moves on any of those streets. He looked up. Yeah, okay. You're the most complete record we have of what this area looks like. That's not nothing. He nodded. He meant it. The scout run was the strangest drive I've ever done. Rosark and I went northeast on the bypass, which we knew. Then onto Route 9 at the Merton interchange, which we didn't. Route 9 is a state highway, 2 lanes, running through a series of small towns between Harlow and Merton. Beeson, Port Creek, Stanhope, 3 others. Beeson was quiet. A gas station, a diner, a hardware store, a bank, 40 or 50 houses. I saw a few of them on the main street. 3, maybe 4. But they weren't clustered, and they weren't in the road. Rourke drove through at about 25 miles an hour, windows up, engine at moderate throttle. Port Creek was different. Port Creek had maybe 400 people in it, normally. Port Creek had a problem. The main street through Port Creek was blocked. Not by cars, not by barricade, by people. Or things that had been people. I'd never seen this many in one place before, not even from the watchroom looking at the strip mall. The main street, which was Route 9 through town, which we needed, was packed from one side to the other. Maybe 200 of them, maybe more. I stopped the truck 300 yards from the edge of the mass and turned off the headlights. We can't go through that, Rourke said. No. Is there a way around? I tried to remember. Port Creek. I'd driven through it hundreds of times in the last decade, but never paying particular attention to the street layout. There might be a county road on the south side, goes around the town through fields. Do we know if it connects to Route 9 on the other side of Port Creek? Pretty sure. Not completely sure. The route changes if it doesn't. I know. We backed up about half a mile, found a side road going south. It was unmarked, packed gravel, ran between 2 frozen-looking cornfields. We took it slowly, lights off, moving on what the pale daylight gave us. The road went south, then curved east, then north, and at the north end it came out on, not Route 9, a township road that ran parallel to Route 9 about a quarter-mile south. We followed it east. It eventually hit a crossroad where a sign said Route 9 with an arrow pointing north. We went north, crossed Route 9 from the south, and we were beyond Port Creek. Okay, Rourke said. Yeah. Detour adds what, 15 minutes? About that. Worth it. The rest of the route to Merton Township was cleaner. We didn't stop at the gas station Jack had mentioned. We were running reconnaissance, not resupply. We drove past it, saw that it looked intact, noted it on the mental map. We went as far as the County Fire Training Center, which we found after 2 wrong turns on county roads, but found it. A complex of buildings behind a chain-link fence on the north side of a state highway, identified by a sign that said, Harlow County Regional Fire and Rescue Training Center, in the standard font of county government signage. The fence gate was padlocked. I didn't force it. I parked and got out and looked through the chain link at the facility. The main building, 3 stories, institutional brick. The apparatus bay attached to its south side. The water tower rising behind it. A dormitory wing on the west end. A training ground to the north with fixed structures, what they use for search and rescue practice, that looked like a small maze from a distance. No movement inside the fence. None that I could see. Quiet. Good fences, Rourke said. Good fences, I agreed. We started back. The convoy was 7 days later, day 37. I spent those 7 days doing things I'd been wanting to do since day 1 and hadn't had time for. The Arrow finished. I was honestly surprised. The differential was running smooth. The engine turned over clean on the first try. The pump system, which was the whole original point of the restoration, was fully operational. I drove it around Bay 3 twice to check the feel, which Caitlin watched from the bay door with a kind of satisfaction I recognized, because it was the same satisfaction I felt. A thing that was broken is now not broken. The water system, fully operational. 3 weeks of roof drainage had the cistern at about 1,400 gallons. Not full, but substantial. We made the hard decision to leave it behind. You can't take a cistern, but we emptied it into every container we could find, including the 200-liter drums from the chemical storage room that we cleaned out and filled with water. That went in the apparatus bays to go on the trucks. Elaine. I'd promised Elaine I'd come for her. I went with Gary and Andy on day 33. She was exactly where she said, a small house on Callaway Street on the east side, with her daughter Pam, who was 19, and her elderly neighbor Mr. Ott, who was 81 and had a bad hip. All 3 of them okay, shaken and thin from eating carefully, but okay. We brought them back. And on day 35, something happened that I've been going back to in my head every day since. The number transmissions on the modified frequency. Jack had gotten the DF unit working, roughed out a better directional fix. The bearing pointed, he said, to within about 5 miles of the area where the CDC field station was. Dr. Finch was looking at Jack's transcription of the number sequences. We'd gotten them to Station 7 via relay on day 33. Jack had typed them out and read them to us on the radio, which took about 20 minutes, and which Bryce wrote down. These aren't random, Finch said. We assumed that, I said. No, I mean, these are specific. These numbers. She traced down the list with her finger. This sequence, and this one, that's a date notation, day marker. Whatever system this is using, these numbers are telling you what day of the broadcast cycle it is. Day of the broadcast cycle since when? Since the outbreak. She looked up. I'm fairly confident. The last date I'm certain of is the first day of the outbreak. If I count forward from that date to today, the day number is, she did the math in the notebook, 37. And the sequence in the broadcast? She pointed to a cluster of numbers in the middle of the sequence. 37. I sat with that. They've been broadcasting since day 1, I said. The facility has been running since day 1, and it's broadcasting a status signal that includes a day counter. Yes? And the day counter is current. Yes? The facility is still running, I said, on day 37 of this. Yes. Are there people there? Or is it automated? I don't know. But Dale, a CDC field station with containment capability and research equipment, running on day 37. She stopped. There are things there that could tell us things we need to know. I looked at her notebook. 3 weeks of observation notes about what these things are and what they do, and what's happening to the people they came from. Good notes. Important notes. And somewhere in that facility, potentially, A lab where those notes could mean something more than just history. The training center is 30 miles from the facility, I said, give or take. If we're at the training center, that's a viable day trip run. Yes. Then we get to the training center first. Day 37, the convoy. 3 vehicles, the Sabre, the Arrow, and Gary's truck. I drove the Sabre at the front. Rourke drove the Arrow in the middle. Gary drove the truck at the rear. The brush truck stayed behind. Tom Ferris's vehicle now, essentially. And Tom was staying behind with Kevin and Pete and 3 others to hold the station in case we needed to come back. 20 people on the move. More than I'd expected to be managing when this started. We cleared Port Creek on the South Bypass. The gas station we stopped. Got out, checked it, found it, as intact as Jack had described. I filled the Sabre from the pump. I had to hotwire the pump because the power was out, but the tank was still pressurized, and I'd done this before. Took about 20 minutes. We also went in the store. I took my time in there, because I had the Arrow now, and the Arrow has storage capacity. Canned goods, automotive supplies, a good stock of motor oil and transmission fluid, commercial-grade stuff, multiple cases. Packaged food, a locked cabinet behind the counter that I got open with a screwdriver that turned out to contain cigarettes, lottery tickets, and a revolver with 2 boxes of shells. I took the revolver and both boxes, left the cigarettes and the lottery tickets. Back on the road. Merton Township in the early afternoon. No significant contact. Some on the county roads, scattered, easily avoided. The training center gate. I cut the lock with the bolt cutters. We pulled through. I drove the perimeter of the fence first, then the perimeter of the main building. The facility was empty. Nobody home, nobody to ask. But also none of them inside the fence. The chain link had done its work. The main building, glass doors, locked. Andy Novak had the fire axe, and he opened them in about 10 seconds. Not subtle, but we were past pretending subtle was always possible. Inside. Exactly what it had sounded like from outside. Dormitory, with 43 single beds. Commercial kitchen. Backup generator that took me 3 hours to get started, but started. Water tower. Access through the roof. Connected to the building's plumbing, and this was the thing that made me actually say something out loud that wasn't appropriate for Caitlin to hear. To a 2,000-gallon rooftop tank that was still partly full from the last time anyone had used the facility. How much? Patty said. Maybe 800 gallons in the tank, and the well pump, if I can get it working. The facility had its own well. That was why there was a water tower. They'd been off the municipal system. Give me until tomorrow. I got it working that same evening, actually. The well pump had a seized bearing, which I fixed with the spares in the Arrow's toolkit, and about 90 minutes of lying on a cold concrete floor. The pump started and ran. Clean water. Not just collected rainwater, actual well water, filtered through 60 feet of ground. I'd been holding it together pretty well up to that point. I'm not a crying guy, but I stood next to that pump in the equipment room, and I listened to it run, and I felt something happen in my chest that I didn't have a name for. Exactly. Not relief. More like the thing before relief, where you realize something has been tight inside you for a very long time, and you'd stopped noticing it because it had been tight for so long, and now it's let go a little. Just a little, but some. Jack Adler and his 5 people arrived on day 39. 43 miles, 2 vehicles, 1 stop for fuel. They came through the training center gate at around 2 in the afternoon. Jack himself was a tall man, late 60s, crew cut going white, the build of someone who'd been physical all his life and hadn't stopped. 3 career firefighters from Station 12 and 2 volunteers. He shook my hand in the training center parking lot. We'd been talking for a month, and this was the first time we'd met in person. Smaller than I expected, he said. Smaller how? I expected a bigger guy. Voice on the radio. I know, I get that. I'm 5'9" and built like a mechanic, which is to say stocky in specific places and not particularly impressive overall. Good to finally be talking face to face. Yeah, he said. Good. He looked around the facility. I could see him doing the same thing I'd done on the scout run, the assessment, the inventory of features, the mental filing of strengths and problems. Water's sorted, I said. Generators running. Kitchen's functional. We've got 4 months of food at full portions for 28 people, possibly more now with what we've added. Security perimeter? Chain link on 3 sides. Solid block wall on the north side, that's part of the main building. We're working on reinforcing the gate. You got the fence up? The fence was already here. It's an 8-foot chain link, commercial grade. They used it to contain training scenarios. He nodded. And the facility to the southwest. That's the next thing, I said. I got more detail on the number sequences, he said. Finch is right about the day counter, and there's another element in the sequence I think I've figured out. It's a status code. Repeating. I think it's telling us the facility is in lockdown mode. Lockdown. Which means the containment protocols are engaged. Which means someone activated them. I looked at him. Which means, he said, someone was there to activate them. Day 42. The run to the CDC facility. Me, Frank, Jack, and one of Jack's career guys named Bill Sherwood, who turned out to be a former paramedic and the most quietly competent person I'd met in a long time. The Arrow. I took the Arrow because if this was going to be a real mission, I wanted my best vehicle. 30 miles southwest of the training center on county roads. The route was better than I'd expected. Rural, scattered farms, occasional clusters of them on the roads, but nothing that blocked passage. We went slowly, no headlights. Mid-morning, so we had good visibility. The CDC field station was not marked. That was the first thing that surprised me. Jack had a rough address from what we'd managed to piece together from Finch's knowledge and the directional fix. But the building itself had no visible identification. It was a low, flat-roofed structure, maybe 12,000 square feet, set back from a county road behind a tree line. Looked like it could have been an industrial building, a warehouse, something innocuous. Chain link around it, higher than the training center, 10 feet, maybe 12, with razor wire at the top. An access road in from the county road through a gate that had electronic security, card reader, keypad, the whole setup, all dead now with the power out. Except, the county road dead-ended in a field past the facility, so there wasn't through traffic, which was why we came back around to the access road. And as we came back around, I noticed that the lights on the keypad were on. Dim, but on. Green LED, steady. That's running on backup power, Jack said. The building has power, I said. Or at least this gate does. We parked on the road outside the fence and observed for several minutes. No movement inside the fence. The building's windows were small and covered, either shuttered or blacked out. No sounds from inside. Nothing visible from outside. Bill Sherwood had a pair of binoculars. He scanned the building slowly. East wall, he said, upper right corner. I looked. A small white box, sensor or camera, mounted on the wall, and above it, barely visible against the gray sky, an antenna. That's the transmitter, Jack said. That's what we've been hearing. Frank, someone want to try the gate? I got out and walked to the gate. The card reader had a small intercom below it. I pressed the button. Static. Then, who are you? A voice. Liv. A woman. Older. Tired. Something happened in my chest that wasn't subtle. My name is Dale Hargrove, I said. I'm a volunteer firefighter from Harlow County. We've been hearing your transmission for 3 weeks. A long pause. How many are with you? 3 others. We're at the gate. How did you get here? What's the route? I told her. County roads, training center, Merton Township. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a pause that lasted long enough that I thought maybe she'd walked away from the intercom. Then, can you come back in 48 hours? We can. But I'd like to know who I'm talking to. Another pause. My name is Dr. Carlisle. I'm the director of this facility. I have 3 people here. We've been in lockdown since day 2. Her voice was measured in the way that someone's voice gets when they've been measuring it for a very long time. The lockdown protocols require authorization from a chain of command that no longer exists to be lifted. I've been waiting for someone with. I've been waiting. 48 hours, I said. To do what? To make sure you're not infected. I need 2 days of observation before I open this gate. That's not negotiable. We're not infected. I believe you believe that. The protocol is still 48 hours. I looked back at Frank, who was leaning against the arrow watching this with his arms folded. He gave me a small shrug. The shrug said, "She's not wrong." 48 hours, I said. We'll come back. Can you tell me one thing in the meantime? What? The number sequences. The broadcasts. Is there data in them? About the infection? About what you've found? A pause. Yes. Is there a way to decode them without equipment? No. You need our equipment. Another pause. But Mr. Hargrove, there are things in those sequences I think you need to know, which is why I'd like you to come back. We'll be here in 48 hours. Good. A pause that felt like it had weight in it. How many survivors are at your location? 28. More, if we go looking. 28, she said, and I heard something in her voice. Not just the data point, but the response to it. Relief, maybe. The sound of a number that was larger than what she'd been expecting. That's significant. Bring your doctor. We have one. Bring her. The intercom clicked off. 48 hours later. We went back. Me, Frank, Jack, Bill, and Dr. Finch. The gate opened before we reached the intercom. Just opened. The electronic lock cycling on the card reader. A buzz and a clunk, and the gate swinging inward. Someone watching a camera. Someone who'd been watching us approach on the county road. Dr. Carlyle met us at the building's main door. She was in her 60s, short white hair, an expression of controlled evaluation on her face as she looked at each of us in turn. She had a handheld device she used to do a surface temperature check, which struck me as rigorous given that we were standing in 50-degree March weather outside. She looked at our eyes, asked each of us 2 or 3 specific questions about our last week of health. She was thorough. Then she opened the door. Inside the facility, lighting. Real electric lighting, fluorescent overhead. That was the first thing. The shock of being inside somewhere that was lit properly for the first time in 6 weeks. It was a lab. Most of it was a lab. Small office section, a conference room that had been converted to sleeping quarters, a break room that was functioning as a kitchen with a propane setup, and then the main floor, which was full of the things labs are full of. Equipment I couldn't fully identify, refrigerated storage units, a negative pressure biosafety cabinet along one wall, computers running on what turned out to be a substantial solar array on the roof, supplemented by a diesel generator. 2 other people, a young lab technician named Pete, not our Pete, who looked like he hadn't slept well in 6 weeks, and an older security contractor named Barry, who had a rifle and the face of a man who'd been maintaining vigilance for a very long time and was tired of it. Sit down, Dr. Carlyle said. She gestured to the conference room. I want to tell you what we know. What she told us over the next 3 hours. I can't fully write down here, partly because some of it is beyond my expertise, and partly because I'm still working through it. The broad outlines. The outbreak was not natural. She said this without drama, without the kind of escalating urgency you'd expect. She said it the way she'd probably said 100 findings over her career. Here is what the data shows. The pathogen is structurally consistent with a modified lentivirus. Certain elements of its genome do not appear naturally occurring. I want to be clear that I'm not telling you someone made this intentionally. I'm telling you the pathogen has characteristics that suggest it has been significantly altered from a natural precursor. Whether that alteration was deliberate or the result of some natural mutagenic process in a contained environment, I can't say. The vector, primarily fluid contact through bites, as Finch had found independently. Also, she said, potentially through a mucosal route that required very close sustained exposure, not casual contact, not the air in a room, but close sustained contact with respiratory secretions. She wasn't certain. Finch's notebook came out, and they started comparing data, and I sat back and watched 2 doctors find each other's findings, and I thought, This is what's supposed to happen. This is the thing that was supposed to be happening in a building like this, with people like these, 3 weeks ago before the rest of it fell apart. The immunity question. This is the one that mattered. We have preliminary evidence, Carlyle said carefully, of partial resistance in some individuals. Not immunity in the classic sense, not complete protection, but a delayed or attenuated progression in some bite cases that suggests variance in host susceptibility. Frank, who had been sitting in the corner of the conference room with his arms folded and his shoulder healed now and everything Trish and Finch had said about 9 days and no progression turning out to be true, Frank looked up at this. What creates that variance? Finch asked. We don't know yet. We have a hypothesis, and the hypothesis requires testing that we've been unable to do alone. We need, Carlyle glanced around at us, we need samples, blood work, from people who were bitten and didn't progress. Frank unfolded his arms and put one hand flat on the table. That would be me, he said. That was 6 weeks ago. A lot has happened since. The basics. We're at the training center. 28 people, now 32. Ryan, the teenager from the car on the radio, showed up on day 45, and 3 others who found us via the Channel 13 broadcasts, which we now maintain continuously. The facility has been integrated into our operation. Carlyle and Pete and Barry moved to the training center on day 51, bringing as much of the critical equipment as could be transported, after we confirmed the facility's generator was going to outlast our ability to maintain the fuel supply for it. The lab work continues in a section of the training center building that we've converted for the purpose. It's not what the original facility was, but Carlyle says it's enough to continue the critical work. The work on Frank's blood has produced findings that Carlyle is careful to call preliminary, and Finch is careful to call promising, and which the rest of us are trying not to call anything yet because that's how you jinx things. Frank, for his part, calls it a needle to the arm twice a week, because that's what it is for him, and he's fine with it. The arrow runs beautifully, which still gives me a kind of satisfaction I can't quite justify given everything else that's going on. I use it for supply runs and for the occasional longer missions. We go back to Harlow every week or 2 now. Quiet runs, specific targets, taking what's useful and noting what we see for the watch logs. Harlow is quieter than it was. Carlyle's data shows why. The progression she described, the simplification of response over time, means that the concentrated populations in urban areas are becoming less coordinated, less dense, slower. They're dispersing, in a sense, though not by dying off, just by becoming less reactive to each other and more reactive to individual stimuli, spreading out across larger areas following sounds and light and whatever instinct remains. It makes the city navigable in a way it wasn't. Not safe, never safe, but navigable. Bryce's watch logs now span 4 legal pads. He's been keeping them since day 1, and he won't stop now. He says it's important to have a record, and I agree. I've read every page of them. He writes in a style that's different from how he talks. Precise, observational, clinical, and reading it, I think that this experience has done something to him that I can't fully account for, and probably won't understand until years from now, when we're somewhere on the other side of this, and I have the distance to look back. Caitlin asked me last week whether I thought things would ever be normal again. I said I didn't know what normal was going to mean. She nodded like that was an acceptable answer, which is very Caitlin. She's more patient with uncertainty than most adults I know. Patty runs the training center's kitchen inventory with Donna. They've turned it into a system that Donna manages and Patty documents, which is exactly what both of them are good at. And the result is that we know precisely what we have, and precisely how long it will last, and precisely what we need to get to extend that timeline, which is the most stabilizing thing I can think of. Let me tell you about the last thing, the one that's still open. 2 days ago, Carlyle came to find me in the apparatus bay, where I was doing scheduled maintenance on the Arrow. She had her notebook, which is getting full the way Bryce's legal pads get full. I want to show you something, she said. She opened the notebook to a specific page, a map, hand-drawn. Not a good map. The proportions were off, and it was clearly done from memory, but recognizable. Ohio. Harlow County in the southwest section of the state. Merton Township northeast of it. The CDC field station further southwest. And then, to the southeast, a city I recognized. Columbus. There's a level 4 facility in Columbus, she said. Full containment, full laboratory capacity, associated with the State University Medical Center. It's a proper facility. You work there? I trained there. I've been on the phone, or I was on the phone before. She stopped. There was a team there, infectious disease specialists, people I know. If they're still there, and if that facility is intact, and if we could get there. Columbus is 80 miles from here. I know. Through how much of what? Between here and there, we don't know. I know that too. She met my eyes. But Frank's data needs more sophisticated analysis than I can do here. And if there are people at that facility who've been working on the pathogen from day one with proper equipment, then you can combine what you know with what they know. Yes. I looked at the map. 80 miles. We'd done 43 to get here, and 43 had been hard and taken a lot of planning. 80, through the outskirts of the state's biggest city, was a different order of problem. Let me talk to Jack, I said. Of course. She closed the notebook. Dale, I want to say something. Yeah. What you've done, what your group has done, coming here, bringing people together, keeping people alive. She stopped. I want to be honest with you. When we went into lockdown on day 2, I thought we had maybe 2 weeks before the power failed and we lost the facility. I had a plan for what I was going to do after that. It wasn't a good plan. I didn't ask what the plan was. I understood what she wasn't saying. I'm glad you were listening on Channel 13, she said. Station 7, I said. That was the whole point. Yes. She almost smiled. Station 7. She walked back toward the building. I stood next to the arrow with a wrench in my hand, and the faint smell of diesel in the cold air, and the sound of Bryce's voice inside somewhere, giving Frank the daily watch report, reading from the legal pad in that precise, careful way he had. I thought about Columbus. 80 miles. A city that was either completely gone, or still had people in it, or some complicated truth that sat between those two things. I thought about the arrow running smooth, the water tower at the training center, full from the well pump. 32 people learning to do this together, getting better at it. I thought about the number sequences that Carlisle's automated system was still broadcasting, still counting up, day 48 now and climbing. I picked up the wrench and went back to work. Day 48, current day. This is where the log is. If someone finds this later and wants to know how 32 people ended up in the Harlow County Regional Fire and Rescue Training Center, that's how. Concrete walls, diesel fuel, a water pump, a doctor with a notebook, and a lot of time spent doing the next necessary thing, without knowing what came after it. The arrow needs an oil change. The generator at the training center has a fuel filter that's been on my mind. Frank's arm healed clean. The Saber's front tires need rotation. And somewhere in Columbus, 80 miles southeast, there might be a laboratory with people in it who know things we need to know. I haven't made the decision yet. I'm making it. Jack and I have been talking about it every evening after the Channel 13 broadcast. Not debating it, just talking about it the way you talk about a job before you take it, turning it over, looking at it from different angles, figuring out what you know and what you don't. The route, the vehicles, the contingencies, the timing. Early summer might be better than late spring. More light, better weather. Bryce asked me last night what I was thinking about. We were both up late. He'd finished his watch at midnight, and I'd been in the bay doing the filter on the generator. And we ended up in the kitchen, with the propane stove going and 2 cups of actual coffee, which we were allowing ourselves again now that the training center pantry had enough room for small luxuries. Columbus, I said. He nodded. He already knew that's what I was going to say. What are the chances it's still, he said, functional? Don't know. Better or worse than this place was. This place had a chain link fence and 1 doctor and an automated transmitter, I said. Columbus has more variables. More people means more risk, and also more resources. More of everything. Yeah. He turned his coffee mug in his hands. He's got his mother's hands. Long fingers, careful movements. I want to come. I know. I'm not asking for permission yet. I'm just saying. I heard you. We sat there with the coffee and the sound of the generator running outside, and the training center around us, full of sleeping people and all of this specific improbable thing we'd built out of nothing, and luck, and a lot of cold early mornings, humming along in the dark. You know what I keep thinking about? Bryce said. What? That Pierce arrow. The whole reason you were at Station 7 that morning. Yeah. If you hadn't been there to hear the radio. I know. If you'd been at the shop, or at home. I know, Bryce. He was quiet. I'm glad you were there. I put my hand on the back of his neck for a second, the way I used to do when he was small, before he got to the age where you don't do that anymore. He didn't pull away. Me too, I said. That's day 48. The log keeps going. There's an oil change that needs doing on the Arrow. There's a generator filter to replace. There's a water pump to check, and a fence to inspect, and a kitchen to help Donna and Patty plan for next week's rationing, and a radio schedule to keep, and a map of Ohio on the wall of the conference room with a city 80 miles away that I'm going to have to make a decision about. 32 people. 6 weeks. A fire station that became a fortress, that became a convoy, that became this. I didn't plan any of it beyond the first hour. The first hour was thick walls, locked doors, go get your family. Everything after that was just the next thing. I'll tell you this much. The Arrow runs. The water's clean. Frank's blood is in a refrigerator in a makeshift lab in a county fire training center. And Dr. Carlisle looks at the results of her tests with an expression that's not quite hope, but is something in the same general area.